2020, and this is the Curriculum Instruction Committee meeting. Before we start, I just want to take a minute to thank our administrators and our teaching staff who have been working tirelessly since March to create an environment where our students can thrive in extraordinary circumstances. Because the situation with COVID-19 has been constantly changing, our leadership has been working to create choices for the O&J Roberts families that can be implemented no matter what place we find ourselves in on August 31st. The leadership team has had to periodically revise our educational strategy, with the only constant being the right of our 5,000 plus students to an outstanding education. So the goal of this meeting tonight is to understand the plan to deliver education to our students in the event families choose a completely virtual model, or if restrictions require us to offer a blended model when only 50% of the student body can attend school at one time. The health and safety measures that we plan to employ with students who are attending school in person, should that be an option, will be discussed in our next meeting, the Pupil Services Committee, and that which will follow this one. So tonight, the way this meeting will run is we have two items on the agenda. The first one is an update on our cyber program, which will be completely online. And then we also have discussion on a blended plan, and you might know that this is a plan that is being worked on as we speak and has only been in place for a week or so, as we have just gotten permission to even implement this type of plan. As we go through the presentations on both of these topics, I'd like the committee, which is myself, Mrs. Booth, Mr. Friel, and Mr. Melnizak, to be able to ask questions as we go along. And then after each presentation, other board members who are here will be able to ask a few questions. And then we would like to take questions from the public until about 7:30. Since we just don't have unlimited time for discussion on this tonight, there will be many times opportunities for the public to get more questions answered if they do not have everything answered for them tonight. And as you see with our presentations, you will see when your chances will be to ask those questions. So with that being the setting here, I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Soter, who will start with agenda item 2.01.
Thank you, Mrs. DiMarino. So we're going to have the presentation available. We're starting with the cyber option. Go right to the next one. So as you can see here, we are talking about the different pathways to reopening our schools. And we have spent some time already and gotten feedback on that traditional option if we were going to be able to return with all students 5 days a week. And so a little bit later tonight, we're actually going to be talking about that blended option because our current restrictions are for that blended option. But we're going to start our evening talking about our OJR Cyber Academy. And so this presentation and our administrators who are here are going to be talking about students whose families wish for them to be exclusively home and working from home and part of our Cyber Academy.
Dr. Soter, if you just pause for one moment. Mr. Friel and Dr. Melnizak, can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear Dr. Soter loudly and clearly when she's talking? All right, great, thank you.
A little softly, but we can hear you.
Oh, I can be loud. You need me to be loud.
We need you to use your voice.
Put your volume up, Paul.
Okay. So a few things to keep in mind for this particular Cyber Academy. This is not your typical Cyber Academy. This is unique for the 2020-2021 school year for a number of reasons. First of all, we have some unique needs this year. We know how we ended our school year last year with all of our students being online. Our students are at all different places on the continuum with their instructional needs. We wanted to plan a program for our students for starting the year that offered flexible options. We know that families may wish to have their students fully online and then get partway into that and say, you know, this isn't working for my family. I think I'd rather my child be in school. We believe that there will be families who will start in school and for whatever reason want or need to be online. We wanted to have an approach for this coming year that offered lots of flexibility for our students. We, of course, wanted our Cyber Academy to be taught by our current faculty, by teachers who have our professional development and have the benefit of working with the colleagues who they know who can give them support and the administrative team who can give them support. We listened very closely to the feedback from our teachers and from our families from our spring online learning. And one of the big, very, very underscored numerous times requests was a greater emphasis on synchronous live instruction and more opportunity for students and teachers to engage in the learning process together. So when you are listening to this particular program for tonight, you're going to hear a huge emphasis on live synchronous instruction at our elementary level, at our middle school level, and at our high school level. So lots of opportunities for students to be engaged with our teachers, coursework that's well aligned to the Pennsylvania core standards, a common format and ease for student use. These were also very specific requests from our teachers and from our families alike. A little bit later, you're going to be hearing about the investment that we are making in our infrastructure by approaching our cyber program the way that we plan to. And last but not least, we want our students who are in our Cyber Academy to be maintaining the schedule that their own school is having. So when their school is in session, our Cyber Academy is in session and the like. So without further ado, we're going to get started with our elementary program, and Mr. Smith is going to get us started.
Thank you, Dr. Soder. Thank you, school board. It's my pleasure tonight to talk about the elementary and finally some instructional focus. Before I begin, I do want to thank Dr. Soder and her team for supporting us throughout the last few months and trying to get these plans together. It has to be noted that all the administrators are grateful to our academic coaches because they've listened to us since probably June and asking questions, helping with the planning process, and above all else, getting the instructional program geared to the items that Dr. Soder just outlined. And then finally, our staff we're truly blessed to have our staff. They're rolled up their sleeves since June, and anytime we needed something, they provided feedback and also the planning process for our instructional content. But with that said, Dr. Soder outlined that the feedback throughout the spring and summer was for more synchronous learning. And so part of our Cyber Academy is an emphasis on synchronous learning. In order to do that, you have to have a schedule. And so the schedule that is going to mirror our master schedule throughout the school day as well. I don't think everyone's going to memorize that schedule right there. We will have further discussions on that through our focus group and our informational sessions over the next 2 weeks. Suffice to say, it's a combination of both synchronous learning and asynchronous learning throughout the school day. Once again, trying to provide families with as much flexibility as possible. It'll be a combination of guided instruction, independent practice, just like we do in a normal lesson throughout the school day. It is developed by each particular grade level, kindergarten through 12, and it's instructed by our OJR staff. And there's going to be some flexibility as far as looking at what type of teacher. We're aiming to make sure it's a grade level teacher. I think it's important to note that it might not necessarily be a teacher from, say, West Vincent or East Coventry, depending on how many students enroll into the program. It could be another second grade teacher from throughout the district. So our information that parents provide us on the number of students attending Virtual Academy is paramount to the planning process. There will also be time throughout the virtual academy for teachers to have office hours to answer parent questions, student questions, small group instruction, as well as checking on student work. Any initial questions before I turn this over to the middle school?
Just wanted to mention that all of our elementary students, K to 6, would be making use of Google Classroom and then being able to access their lessons directly from Google Classroom.
Thank you for bringing that up. Important note that overwhelmingly parents wanted single point entry so that their Google Classroom is what we're going to utilize. And so students will be able to use their Google login to access any information that the teachers put forth.
So I have a question. The independent work that these kids are doing for 45 minutes, how would that look like?
We are also utilizing a program that is got a structured curriculum with it. So as we speak, our teachers are coming in this week to take a look at the information within the program and aligning it to our OJR curriculum. And so finding the avenues that align and then augmenting when needed.
And that's one log on still through the Google Classroom, so parents can set up their kids once, and then I can just stay in there, and I'm clicking to this independent work, whatever that software is, through
Yes.
Google Classroom.
It's important to note that the majority of our students, probably third grade and on, already know all their login information. We'll have to train up, obviously, our kindergarten and remind our first and second graders, but for the most part, students will know their login just because it's always been their login.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith, could you please describe what you mean by synchronous for those parents who have not been involved in any of these issues before? I think we need to explain to those who are not familiar with it exactly what you're speaking of in regards to synchronous and asynchronous.
Great question. Thank you for bringing it up. Synchronous, very fancy way of saying live instruction, where the teacher is going to be leading that instruction with that group. Asynchronous, it could be recorded lessons, could be through our instructional program that's already recorded, or predetermined lessons that the students can log in and access at home. So synchronous learning is live instruction from that grade level teacher. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
I have a question. So the teachers that will be teaching in this program, will they be doing this solely? So they will not be teaching any live students at all. They would just be merely teaching cyber students, the staff.
Great question. That's also going to depend on enrollment, but yes. So the teacher who's a virtual teacher, so as an example, if I have 4 second grade teachers, one will be my virtual teacher because I have, in a magic world, 25 students that will do virtual. Then that teacher would be responsible for those 25 students virtually. Now, live instruction takes place during that because that teacher will be responsible for those 25 students or whatever that number may be.
Okay, and also then how would you staff the special areas? Would they, you know, if you're a phys ed teacher at the elementary level, would that, it would be a little different obviously than if you're teaching all day.
It will be a little different. We will have to work with our special teachers because there could be opportunity for them to present live depending on the discipline, as well as having asynchronous lessons depending on the discipline.
Okay, final question from me anyway. Obviously we're looking, you know, at full-time possibilities or blended and any of these options. If you're an elementary school student and you're in a full-time cyber, would you be able to move back and forth between in-person and cyber if you needed to, or the blended? How would that work?
We're a public institution, so whatever a parent decides, then we will react accordingly. And so a parent does have that option. If they're comfortable in a virtual setting, then that's the program that they could be in throughout that school year. If the magic occurs and a parent wants to come back to brick and mortar or a blended approach, that option is there too. Inherently, though, you can see that it does present unique challenges throughout the school year with looking at sizes and class sizes and making sure that we stay appropriately when possible. Dr. Soder?
The digital resource that we're planning to use with our elementary students in the Cyber Academy, we will also be using in our classrooms in our schools. So that was why we did this, so that there could be that ease of transition should students need to go from the in-person instruction into cyber or cyber into the in-person, that they should be very close to where their grade level classmates would be. We are going to be using the same digital resources in both environments.
But there could be a possibility that the student would have to change teachers.
Yes, yes. If they had started at cyber and then came into the classroom, yes, it's possible that they would need to change teachers.
Okay.
It's important to note, and I just want to piggyback on what Dr. Soder said, that the curricular pieces, that's where our instructional coaches have been key, along with staff, to try and keep that as aligned as possible to plan for those transitions.
We have more.
Can I just understand the difference between the Cyber Academy, full online and blended, which has, part of the instruction online? Why there's the need for the unique Cyber Academy, and do we run into any, depending on, let's say, 15 parents sign up for Cyber Academy for second grade and 35 parents sign up for the blended, do we run into like staffing alignment issues, having this completely separate versus just having the blended where you can choose just to go full cyber, but you're part of the blended, in terms of staffing?
Mr. Field, I'm not sure I understand the question. Basically, the virtual setting is for those parents who do not want to enter the school building or for some reason they don't feel safe, or they're not interested in the brick and mortar setting.
I'm sorry. Maybe I was unclear in my question. My question is, in a blended scenario where it's partly brick and mortar, partly cyber, you're delivering cyber instruction to kids. Why separate cyber out completely and have its own unique set of staff and teachers for it, versus just have those kids that choose not to come to school participate in the same live instruction that that kids that sign up for blended? Why is the distinction in the staffing, and will that create any potential staff issues in terms of depending on how many parents sign up?
So, Mr. Friel, I will attempt to answer your question. As a former elementary teacher of second and third grade, it is very difficult for me to imagine an elementary teacher being able to teach students in person and students that are also virtual at the same time. Elementary students really depend on the support of their teachers. We believe that based on the feedback that we've received from parents across the district, that we will have enough students at each grade level to have a dedicated teacher at each grade level for this, for our Cyber Academy. So the teacher may come from a different school, which goes back to Mrs. DiMarino's point that if a parent chooses for their child to return to in-person instruction, that they may have a different teacher, but we'll be pulling our resources from across the district to identify teachers to teach in the Cyber Academy. And all of their students will be online. At the elementary level, we are not looking for our elementary teachers to teach students in front of them and students remotely at the same time.
Oh, I got you. So okay. I'll wait to hear the blended stuff then. Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Inherently, class assignments at the elementary level will have to be much more fluid than in past years. So that's just going into it, knowing that parents have the option of going both totally virtual or coming back into brick and mortar. We have to be flexible.
Go ahead.
I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Stoltzfus.
Just one moment for our audience while they sanitize the microphone.
Okay, we all set? Good evening, everyone. My name is Corbin Stoltzers. I'm the principal at the middle school. I'm glad to be here with you tonight to talk about the two options that we have at the middle school right now, starting with our Cyber Academy. And what you'll see is that the middle school's proposal for the Cyber Academy is slightly different from the elementary school model, knowing that we have a different clientele, of course, perhaps some clientele that, at least theoretically, are a little bit more self-sufficient. Are able to learn independently, perhaps at a different level than many of our elementary school students might be able to. Our focus was really on keeping things as synchronous as possible, meaning obviously the ideal situation pre-COVID is that students learn best when they're in a room with their teacher. So that's obviously the best option. But knowing, because of the situation that we are in, either by choice or not by choice, there are going to be students who are not going to be present in the same classroom. We wanted to make it as live as could possibly be and give them the opportunity to be in their class that they were assigned to on their schedule, with the teacher they were assigned to for that class, and with the peers who would have been in that class with them. The only difference being that they'll be on a computer screen. Like the elementary schools, we will be utilizing Google as kind of our pathway for students to access and for our teachers to stream their lessons live. This will be as synchronous and as realistic as possible. What I mean by that, we have an 8-period day in the middle school. So if you have math with teacher X period 1, which begins at 7:30, the expectation, the hope for us is that at 7:30 you log on to that teacher's class and attend live. Our classrooms at the middle school will be equipped with some new technologies, some cameras that will allow the teacher to stream their classes, and the microphone on the cameras is of a much higher quality than that you would find on, say, a laptop. So they are very easy to hear wherever the teacher might be in the classroom, and that was important to us for our students who are going to be at home. The other thing for us that was nice about this option is that really it is quite fluid, meaning that not only do you have the option a month in, a marking period in, a semester in, to change your mind in your direction, but really it offers the opportunity to do that on a weekly basis, on a daily basis. We're asking parents in these cases to really monitor and screen, to be the first individuals to screen their children before they leave their home each day. And in doing so, if you as a parent have a child who wakes up and isn't feeling quite right, and you make the decision, you know, while we are attending live, today might not be a day that we want our child to attend live. We're going to err on the side of caution and keep them home. And if things continue, we'll go see the doctor, whatever you would likely do. This offers them, as long as their health is not supported, they can't do so, this offers them the opportunity to still join in live to all of their classes that day. So the third best option then, of course, if you can't be live in person, if you can't be synchronous through Google, is to at least be able to access the lesson from that day on your own time, perhaps later in the day. While this is not something we promote, because again, we would like folks to be present synchronously and live with their classes. But if for whatever reason that is not possible, we're asking our teachers to record one lesson from each of their classes. When I say each of their classes, you might have a math teacher who teaches 3 sections of pre-algebra and 2 sections of algebra 1. We're asking them to record one of their pre-algebra lessons from that day and one of their algebra 1 lessons from that day, and then post them so that the students who are not live in person, were not able to attend synchronously that day, can still, perhaps later in the afternoon, perhaps that evening, view the lesson that was taught that day for their class. Additionally, maybe they were live and in class that day, but as they're doing their work from home, they wanted to rewatch the part where the teacher explained how to solve a certain equation or how to figure out some kind of a science lab. They can still go back then and watch that same lesson 2, 3 times, however many times they need to allow it to sink in and for them to have mastery of that content from that day. So that was important to us, and we saw the benefits of being able to have students be as live as possible through a computer screen. But again, once their schedule is set, to have the same teacher be in class with their peers, to be able to ask questions live as the lesson is taking place of their teacher, we found the benefits of that. So again, there is that asynchronous piece as well. There will be recorded sessions for those who need it, but we do promote the attendance during the class period or during the time of day that your class is taking place. If school happens to close for whatever reason, for a week, 2 weeks, extended periods of time, this is a seamless transition for the middle school, as we have teachers who can continue to deliver content at the same time that their class periods run. So if they teach periods 1, 3, 7, and 8, then they can still at those times a day have those lessons ready to go. They send invites through Google Calendar. The student just clicks on that link for that Google Meet for that class, and they're in the class for that. It's simple, one touch, one-stop shopping, and they're with their classmates.
I have a question. If we have, this might be beyond what we're ready to talk about, but I know that one of the issues with just the whole cyber learning, blended and all these things was just attendance. Keeping track of the kids have to attend school. If we have students that are allowed to kind of move back and forth between the synchronous and asynchronous sessions, is there going to be how is this attendance going to be handled? Like, what if you have kids that go to this class but don't go to that class and getting behind and things like that? Is the teacher going to have to manage all that?
Very timely question. And what we don't want is for our teachers to be bogged down with that each day. Students who are attending virtually or through the Cyber Academy will be coded differently. In fact, there was just a meeting today between our database coordinator, Dr. Marchini, administrators from high school and middle school to talk about just that piece, the attendance piece. And as it was in the spring, the need for some grace and flexibility. The students that we'll need to focus on, obviously, are those who are not attending synchronously and then also not asynchronously completing assignments, turning in work, et cetera. The ultimate goal for us, obviously, we want students to complete the work that is given, to continue to participate in class. We are promoting synchronous attendance and being part of that class when it's happening live, but we have to recognize that there will be instances where that can't happen. I think students who are planning for this to be similar to what it was in the spring are going to be in for a bit of a rude awakening. It's going to be quite different, as they're going to have every class each day synchronously. So if they're planning a noon wake up and then I'll finish all my work between 5 and when I go to bed, they're going to find that extremely difficult, and will realize that the best option is going to be to get into those classes live as often as possible. But no, we don't want our teachers tracking that down. We're still in conversations about what the attendance piece will look like, but we'll show the same flexibility, and our ultimate goal is that students are accessing the curriculum that's being provided, they're completing their work and engaging in some way. The students who are going to stand out to us are those who are off the radar altogether.
I have a question, and it might be more in tune for high school, but I'm sure it does as well for yours. On the full OJR Cyber Academy, if a student chooses to go in that direction, what is the plan for electives, and how does that affect staffing if it's full cyber?
Yeah. So the electives for the middle school are either going to be even day or odd day electives. So they won't have electives every day in certain classes. Some of them are going to have to get very creative. I'll use the phys ed as an example. The camera is not going to be something that's practical in the gymnasium. So those teachers may have to create workout programs for students and then have them check in or log that or create a journal or something they could submit through Google that shows they've been getting exercise, shows they've been doing some physical activity. Other classes, teachers are aware they're going to have to perhaps take what they normally would do, modify it quite a bit so that it becomes more of a virtual, use some of the software that's out there that's available, some of the programs that are already canned and available for them to use with students. So they're aware they're going to look different than what they normally would for sure. Some of them are very hands-on, applied tech, for example, but in applied tech, there's a lot of CAD that takes place, so there's a lot of online programming that can be used there as well. So they may have to dive in and explore options that they haven't had to do so before, but knowing that they're going to be students, at least some students who are there virtually with them, they're going to have to find ways to modify what they're doing.
Thank you.
Additionally, and just not to cut short, but the cameras in some rooms will be fixed, and we recognize that in some rooms it's more beneficial for the cameras to be movable. I'll use science when there's labs going on as an example. Art class, where the teacher may want to show up close on the desktop what they're doing. So in some classrooms, we'll identify that the cameras in there, rather than being fixed and focused on a whiteboard or the front of the room, should be movable.
Again, thank you.
Another question. I've been told that I have to talk right into the microphone, so sorry. I'm not gonna. As far as electives that you're talking about, obviously one of my big passions is the music program. So I'm thinking that if a student is completely wanting to be a cyber student, but suddenly, wow, I wish I could come in for chorus. Is that going to be something that would be allowed, assuming that someone's coming in for chorus, or would that not be allowed?
I think that's something that can absolutely be allowed. Where our chorus classes aren't so overloaded that we couldn't allow it to happen and have them in the auditorium where they could be spaced out substantially in the auditorium and use that space for the classes that might be, you know, if it's a 25 student class, they can be in the auditorium spread out with plenty of, way more than 6 feet between them in there. So I would think if, you know, if there was an 8th period, either beginning or end of day chorus class, which there is, or band, which there is, then they could attend first in the morning or later in the afternoon to participate in those performance groups.
Do you have other questions from committee?
Yeah, I have a question. I know in live instruction that you have a bunch of teams for the students, and they kind of do things together, have meetings together, either here or with a blended program. What would that look like?
Are you speaking
Orange team?
Like about the teachers or the students?
Students.
Well, the students, I mean, typically with the teaming, where the students might find that to come into play is if they were on field trips, or if they had a large group team activity where there's 150 or more students participating at once, and that's not going to happen as it is with some of the restrictions right now anyway. So what it comes down to as far as the teaming goes really is a benefit for the teachers to have some common time each day where they can discuss performance of students. I have student X, he hasn't been in my class virtually or live for the last 2 weeks. Yeah, me too. I noticed the same thing. Let's take some time now to make calls, and here's the talking points we want to have with the family. Here's some supports we can put in place for those students. So really the teaming piece is going to be more of a benefit this year for the teachers than for the students. The students will still have the team of teachers that they can get to know a little bit better in this setup, because there's only, you know, the same 5 teachers on the team that they have instead of 25 throughout the building. So it still creates that community, whether it be virtual or in person. The community is still there, but those large group activities aren't going to happen.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. Thank you.
So, quick question: in the technology and the way it goes. So I love this plan that it's mirrors our regular school day. I sign on. I have the normal my normal class schedule with my normal time, same students, same teachers. The only difference is I might be behind a computer doing it. What's the two-way interaction? You know, I'm a student at home. Am I going to be able to ask a question of the teacher like I would normally and participate while students are in the class? Can you just explain how that works? Is it going to be just like being in class only I'm home?
Yeah, sure, great question. So so we have the cameras in each classroom, and every camera will be hooked up to a Chromebook separate from what the teacher would use or separate from what the students will have at the middle school this year as well. So it'll be a device that is tethered to the camera and stays that way. It'll require a little bit of a change in behavior from teachers, because if they ask the class as a whole group, are there any questions? And they look around the classroom, they have to also remember then to go over to the computer screen and look at the computer screen, much like we're doing right here, to see if students have their hand raised or whether they're raising their hand physically or with a little hand raising thing they can do. But the teacher's going to change and make sure that they're checking in frequently with the students who are virtual as well. So those students from home will be able to interact. We are going to create some norms for our students from home, and one of those norms that we would like to have in place is that they need to be seen on the screen and not presenting an icon to make it appear that they might be in attendance while they're actually playing Fortnite in the next room over. So we would like to have them visible on the screen in their class so the teacher can look on that screen at any given time and see, there are my 10 students from this class period who are virtual, and they are here. They are present. I can see them. I can see them raise their hand. So yeah, it'll be as live as they can be without actually being physically in the space.
Great, thank you.
All right, so if you'll sanitize that microphone, then Mrs. Slade will be up, Mrs. DiMarino and Mrs. Booth. When you're speaking, I know that you have to lower your mask and speak directly into the microphone. People are not able to hear what you're saying. We're trying our best to be physically distanced and to wear masks, but it's very challenging. This is our first time that the board is in person and virtual. We can see that there's lots of obstacles to being in person right now. So thank you, Mrs. Slade, you're up.
Right. So what I'll start with is that the high school plan mirrors in most ways what the middle school is doing. The big difference between what the middle school is planning that Mr. Stoltzfus just relayed to you and what the high school does is that we use Canvas instead of Google Classroom. That's the big difference. So the first thing is that same thing, synchronous and asynchronous sessions are available. We're highly encouraging students to use the synchronous option and have that opportunity for live instruction with their Owen J. Roberts High School teachers. The students are in the same classes as the other OJR students because they already have their schedule. High school schedules were released around Memorial Day, and any student that opts for the Cyber Academy would continue to have that same schedule. Doesn't change on Skyward. It's the same exact thing as it has been for a few months. Students who opt for the asynchronous option can watch those lessons on Canvas at their convenience. They'll be posted for a few weeks, and that's also an option for students who, like Mr. mentioned, want to go back and review. A student who's present in class and wants to review the lesson, or someone who's in the Cyber Academy watches it at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and then wants to watch it again at midnight when they're still awake, as they are sometimes. So it really permits flexibility for all of our students, regardless of whether they're Cyber Academy or present in the brick and mortar school. Range of academic courses are offered, including AP and IB. Like I mentioned before, students already have their schedules. If they opt for the Cyber Academy, they will continue to be in those courses that they already have. Opportunities to engage with teachers during actual class time. We are working with our teachers, with our department chairs. We did a demo lesson yesterday with one of our math teachers where she was teaching students live in person and also students who were present via Google Classroom. We will continue to work with our department chairs and also our tech integration coach, John Yoder, on improving the ability for our teachers to provide great instruction for our students, whether they're present in the building or doing the Cyber Academy. And like Mr. Stoltzfus also mentioned, seamless transition if school is closed. If we have to go to full remote learning for all students, things will continue as they are. And then also if you have a student who doesn't feel well one day, has to stay home, they'll be able to jump right onto that lesson and view the lesson through Canvas. And then the Cyber Academy students will also be able to access all the other content that is available on Canvas for all of the students who happen to be in that course section.
Okay, great. If no one has any questions, maybe some of our other board members who aren't on the committee would need to have a question. So he might be asking a question of, I guess, any of the three: elementary, middle school, and high school.
So at this time, in case our board members did not hear, Mrs. DiMarino is asking if any of our other board members have a question. For those of you that are virtual, you'll need to raise your hand. At this time, we're not taking questions for community members. We're trying to identify where the board members are on the screen. And then if we have any board members in the audience, we'll need to sanitize the microphone. And then I see Mr. DeFore has a question. Thank you. We have a wireless microphone in the boardroom here, and so Mr. DeFore has a question, and then Mr. D will be unmuted, and he'll be able to ask his question.
Okay, can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
So some of the questions I have, well, the first one's kind of silly. Is gym required for cyber?
The question was, is phys ed required for cyber? Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's a state requirement.
Okay. Yeah, the next question is, if I have an assignment that requires equipment such as a chemistry lab, can I pick up equipment from school to complete my chemistry lab?
The answer is yes. All right, they're developing a plan for how students are going to be able to have the lab equipment.
So what type of training have the teachers been given for cyber school?
Mr. DeFore's question was about what type of training. So Dr. Soter, I know you can answer this because it's extensive.
So as far as using the Canvas platform, our teachers are well versed on this, and we have a tech integration coach who's been working with our teachers for the past 2 years on using Canvas. So one of the things that in our view of our sample lesson that we did yesterday, we identified some non-negotiables for the teachers and for the students, and we are setting up the experience so that during our staff in-service time, teachers will be able to participate as a student and see a lesson so that they can make some adjustments to their own instruction based on what it feels like to be as a student with a teacher in their own department. So we're working on those plans now.
Great, thank you. So my last two are really quick. If I'm having technical support, technical issues with cyber, is there a number I call, or do I go through my teacher, or? Okay.
Yes, there is a help desk, and our tech department supports that. We have an individual that's assigned to this school and every school, in addition to Mr. San Francisco's department.
Okay, last quick question. If I have a child at home and they're struggling online with cyber school, but we choose not to send them to live school, are there any additional resources to help them or teach them how to learn remotely?
So absolutely, that the same supports and services that we have in place here in school, reading specialists, math support teachers, all of those supports are available to students online. And so we will be continuing to monitor student progress through assessment, because this is an area of concern for our students being online, and that we know that students, this isn't for everybody. And so we will continue. We have instructional support teachers, K through 8, who will be assisting with getting the supports and services to those students.
Thank you.
Thank you. So if you can unmute Mr. Deal. Mr. Deal is next.
Hi, good evening, and thanks for the presentation. My question is around, can you describe a little bit about testing protocols? How would a student who's taking tests and in cyber world compare to the experience of a student who's in person? How do you make sure the books and notes aren't opening and notes coming out during the test time?
I can answer that for, currently for our hybrid students, they have assessments in this capacity now. And so some of them have the nature of the test is a take-home test. Others, it is submitted through Canvas. So they're in the class and they are working and they actually submit the assignment or submit the quiz or the test through Canvas. And so the teacher can be monitoring that way. I don't know if you wanted to offer anything more from our other online classes, if there's been anything different, but our teachers have been managing that. Sure, it'll be even more of an issue now, but our teachers have been managing that. Yeah, thanks.
I do have another question. I will, or is somebody else waiting?
Mrs. Munson's after you. Has the microphone if you want to give her a turn. All right, you're up, Mrs. Munson.
Yeah, you're up.
Right, hopefully this is a quick question. We do know that the Chromebooks will be supplied for all middle school and high school students. What about devices for the elementary program? What is recommended, and can the school provide a device if necessary?
That's actually just a little bit later in our presentation, but great segue. Yes, if a student is in need, just like we had when our schools were closed in the spring, if students were in need, they were issued a school device. And the digital resources that we are using will work with a tablet or a laptop. They don't need anything special for the digital resources, the K-6 program.
And to add to that, we let the students in elementary keep their Chromebooks all summer preparing for whatever scenario we would have in the fall. We didn't want to give them out again, so they were able to keep them and utilize them for need. And we're going to continue working with the guidance counselors and the elementary principals to make sure everyone who needs a Chromebook or a device has that device.
All right, Mrs. Booth, you're up.
Okay, no one else is back there. All right, don't want to interrupt anyone else. If there's a scenario, and I'll just say if French Creek has to close down because there was a child who was infected with somebody else, how are the synchronous teachers going to deal because they're still supposed to be online? Are they going to move to another building? I'm sure you've prepared for that, but thinking of scenarios.
So we actually talked about that last night during the board meeting, that when we were talking about those flexible instructional days. Oh, sorry. When we were talking about those FID days, those flexible instructional days, if we have the need to close a single school or anything less than the full district, then we can make use of one of those flexible instructional days and teachers can assign work, or the students would be able to go on to those digital resources, make use of those throughout that day. Teachers could either teach from another building or from another location and still have the day count. So that is our plan if we would have the need to close less than the full district.
Well, that does lead me to just one more question. So we can use the flexible day in different facilities?
We
Not the whole
can,
district.
if we are approved, we can, but we can't exceed 5. So, I mean, we would be judicious about using them.
Okay, so it would be like, we would have to use one if French Creek had to shut down, but that would cover the whole district. We have five, not for each facility.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Correct.
Thank you for clarifying.
I one last question. I know you guys have done a great job with this, but could you explain to the audience what happens if a student has lousy Wi-Fi access?
One moment while Mr. San Francisco gets to the microphone.
So we've been providing hotspots on demand when needed, and we've worked with Comcast and Service Electric to provide internet to houses that we need, and we keep identifying those that need internet, and we, again, working through the guidance counselors and that. We were able to keep those hotspots again this summer to the students that needed them, and we keep monitoring that. The principals give us the information, and we work with those families to make sure they get the Internet Essentials program, the Verizon program, or a hotspot from us.
Great, thank you.
I have one last question here, and it goes to, I guess, both middle school and high school. I mean, this is great. It mirrors the same experience the best I can if I was in class versus out of class. to that extent, are we going to have clubs and some of the extracurricular activities that are that normally would meet after school? Are they going to be virtual accommodations to this? How much of those like extracurricular activities are in the cyber world still going to continue on? And then I just want to point out that Lydia Stutzman's has her hand raised too, and we should probably grab her.
Comment on that?
Good evening, Bill Richardson from the high school. So with the setup that we have in the high school and also in the middle school, we'll be able to host activities within the same restrictions and guidelines that we would have for students that are coming into the building. It's going to depend on how many students in the classroom and the restrictions of distancing, and we would enforce all of that, mask wearing, et cetera. For larger groups, again, some could attend virtually. All classrooms are going to be set up with video equipment, so the teachers that are typically hosting the clubs will have access to that. And the plan is to make available as many of the activities as possible, as feasible, given the restrictions that we have.
Oh, and why I got you up there, pull out programs like, you know, in that same vein, gifted or IEP stuff or extra support. How's that step in and step out with in virtual and cyber world?
So that just continues. Those teachers will be online with their students. So ATP teachers, special education teachers. I know that some of you actually saw special education teachers working with online. So those teachers will be live with their students that are in the Cyber Academy.
Great.
We have a question from Mrs. Stutzman. I think your microphone is unmuted, Mrs. Stutzman.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. What do you expect will be the biggest challenge and or risk with teachers given the flex? Because it's a wonderful how flexible we can be and allow students to start hybrid or academy and then start academy, go into hybrid, go into in person. But with that back and forth, if we also have some teachers that are focused, especially at elementary level, if they're focused solely on I'm the academy teacher, and then we have more and more kids coming back into school, what do you think is the biggest risk there from a teacher perspective?
If we cannot ignore the biggest risk are our teachers getting sick. And so if one of our teachers takes ill, then we have to hire a substitute teacher to be able to fill that spot. And so that's going to be the biggest challenge I foresee. Mr. Smith, you wanted to add on?
As an elementary team, and I'm sure the middle and high school are in the same boat, we've been actively interviewing all summer, currently all week, for that scenario, so that we have increased pool of qualified candidates. So we're actively seeking that out.
And I think I was thinking more along the lines of scheduling and or availability and or want and desire on the teacher's part. In other words, unless I heard you wrong, you said with the elementary specifically, if we have, say, 50% of the population is home and 50% are in person, you will have assigned a third grade teacher to the in-home kids. If that 50% goes down to 25% and you don't need as many teachers teaching virtually, then what? So like, what are some of have you given consideration around those challenges and risks?
In my opinion, and this will have to be worked out obviously with the rest of the admin, we're going to have probably some type of hard deadline and timeline, whether it's quarter-based or trimester-based, to make some natural transition points. I don't think you can do a hard switch in October 20th or
right.
But I think there has to be some natural breaks throughout the school year to see if a change is necessitated.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, I do. Mm-hmm. If we don't have more questions, we can move on. Great. So 2.02, our blended plan. Can we talk about that?
You have more slides, don't you?
Yep. Oh, we have more slides. Sorry.
So just like last week, We were providing opportunities for parents to have feedback and input into the plan. We are looking for opportunities for parents to learn more about this option for their students. So we are looking at Monday as having the website information up and available for the Cyber Academy. Virtual open house sessions, we have 4 scheduled, and there are 3 going on at each of those times, 1 for elementary, 1 for middle, 1 for high school at each of those times. The Zoom links will be available on the website for, as I said, elementary, middle, and high school sessions. And then what we will be looking for our parents to do, every year, our parents do that annual registration in Skyward, where they go in and update information for their child. And so beginning on July 31st, we hope to have that Skyward annual registration open. And parents can, as part of that annual registration, make a selection if they want their child to be in the cyber program. Okay. And then the next slide, we've actually covered most of what's on the next slide, but if Mr. San Francisco wishes to add anything here, but most of this we've already talked about, that student Chromebooks are already in the hands of our 7th through 12th graders, or will be for our incoming 7th graders. And if they are needed, if devices are needed, they would be available for our younger students. We've already talked about the additional equipment, that some of our cameras would be mounted, some would be portable, and that we do have support for our teachers and students. But Mr. San Francisco, if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, our Chromebooks for going into 7th, 8th, and 9th graders are here and being configured. The principals from the middle school and high school will be sending an email out shortly with the information of when to pick them up. The students that have a district Chromebook in those grades will return them, and then they get the permanent Chromebook that day for 7th, 8th, and 9th graders. I know a lot of us talked about Google and Canvas. We are a single sign-on district with Google. So any software program that we've looked at, that we've evaluated, that we've moved on, will be that single sign-on with Google. So I know in the spring, we had a lot of logins and things like that. We are streamlining, for the most part, all of the resources. So once you sign into Google, you'll sign into Canvas, you'll sign into Google Classroom, you'll sign into Accelerate, you'll sign into all these other things that have that. And the curriculum department, the technology department, and the buildings have been working together with this program. The support, yeah, we're going to have the same level of support. We'll have tech days come up, drop off. You know, we've done that all spring. We did some deliveries. Anything we can do to support the hardware, we will do. The software part of it with Canvas, Google Classroom, will go back to the teachers first, the buildings and things like that. And then if there's a bigger issue, it'll come to the technology department. But you always start with the software issue with that, with the teachers. But the hardware is, they'll have a line, they'll have an email, there'll be help desk, there'll be everything available for parents and students with that. For the cameras, you know, again, we talked about that. Our installation is going to happen this summer, and the support for that will be in the buildings. And we talked about getting extra support also for the first month to support our teachers and staff about using the cameras and just for hardware issues that came up. Bandwidth, we've tested bandwidth with the intermediate unit. We've raised our bandwidth here in the building with the limited amount of students that are going to be on campus and off campus. It kind of negates the use from the streaming and things like that. We are going to do a hard test with 50 cameras and stream 24/7 in the next couple weeks and just monitor everything. So we've already had some cameras in the building streaming. We really didn't see a problem with that. We survived a lot of live streaming events like March Madness and things like that in the past that eat up bandwidth, and Netflix, things like that. We are confident that we are going to be good with, there will be hiccups, but for the most part, we've been planning infrastructure for the last 6 years here. And now we're ready for this for the most part right now.
I'm just going to add, if you wanted to just comment on the investment in infrastructure regarding the new technology that we'd be adding to the classrooms with our cameras.
So yeah, so each classroom will get that camera and either a Chromebook or a PC connected. We are going to hardwire the majority of these cameras to not tax the wireless system that's in place. We have a wireless access point in every classroom in this district to handle the Chromebooks and iPads we have K-12. We've been doing this for years. So we built the infrastructure with new switches, new everything. With the camera hardwired, it will not tax the wireless system. It'll just be hardwired, better connection, solid connection back to the switches. We replaced, not to get too technical, a lot of head-end switches in each of our buildings. They're 10 gig, and we are ready for the infrastructure that we're going to put in. The IU is partnering with us with monitoring a lot of this. Been partnered with every district in the county, and we're part of that consortium. So it's great that we have monitoring on the IU end, our own staff end, and for the network piece, we're going to keep monitoring that. And we put switches with E-rate and things like that in the district that really got us prepared for this moment.
Okay, let's go ahead.
In the interest of time, Mr. Caputo, if you would just go to Dr. Soder's next presentation. We did prepare information for the board on the marketing of the OJR Cyber Academy, and I'll share that with you in board docs later this week. I think it's best if Dr. Soder continues on with the blended model.
Okay, so you're going to be very familiar with the first slide of this. So as you can see, we are now going to be talking about the blended opportunity for students who would be in person. And like I had said earlier last week, we spent a lot of time getting parent feedback and input in that opportunity if we were going to have all students here for 5 days a week. And with our current restrictions, we are now looking at our blended option. So you can go right on. So just a few points for this. We've already talked about the unique needs instructionally for this school year, the desire to have students in a flexible situation. This does promote students to be able to be in classes with physical distancing. This gives us smaller classroom arrangements, opportunities for small groups. We already have talked about the use of technology in classes and at home. And what we're going to be talking about for elementary, middle, and high school would be how we would be managing a smaller group of students being here. So the students who would be in person would still be maintaining their classes and schedule here in the school, but we would be potentially looking at half of the students. For example, our district midpoint is somewhere in the K to L range of alphabetical names. So we would be looking at potentially half of the students coming in on a given day and the remaining half being at home and tuning in, being part of that cyber program, and then switching on another day. So we're going to move right into it with Mr. Smith for elementary.
I think we've had about a week, less than a week, to switch into looking at the blended option. And once again, I have to stress at the elementary level, we would not be even at this point without our academic coaches. And the importance of having the academic coaches is to break down our curriculum, align it to our virtual programming which is Accelerate, and to make that alignment, because that is going to be key at every elementary level, that our scope and sequence is even more broken down than normal. If you think about it, it just very quickly, we're going to break our classroom in half. One half will be A, the other B, and our students that have special needs and or need the continuity of learning on a 4-day basis, that'll be group C. And I think as you notice at each level, group C will be invited and to come in all 4 of the instructional days. If you think about Monday through Friday, Wednesday being our our point of the week where we're able to do a whole group virtual setting, professional development with our staff, and also that time to check in with each of the students, especially on that whole group level. So when you look at a Monday, Tuesday, half the students coming in, think about your school day. Everything is cut in half. It allows us to create those social distancing spaces. One of the key things I want folks to remember in that group B part of the presentation, or I'm sorry, part of the grouping, the classroom teacher will be responsible, and it all goes back to routines. And so everything that is a normal routine is going to be different. And so it just gives us an opportunity to stress new classroom routines. Mr. Stoltzfus talked about earlier having a set of norms. That's going to be the same for the elementary level. We will need to create, teachers will have to have their set of norms. What you do in a virtual setting and will mirror what we do in the live session. So your students will come into school Monday and Tuesday, live instruction with the teacher. At the same point in time, they're part of the teacher's classroom routine will have to be, when does that set up where they can do a morning meeting both virtually and live. That could be done through a Google Meet, and then the asynchronous learning would take place for the rest of that afternoon. Wednesdays when we can connect again with all groups. And then you flip your schedule, so Group B, which is the second half of your classroom, would come in on Thursday and Friday, and you basically are flipping your schedule so that Team A then would be doing the virtual learning. This offers the ability to maintain all the requirements that are coming down from Chester County Health Department, as well as doing our very best to meet all students' needs. And once again, for those students that have related services or special education needs, they will be invited to participate in all 4 days. That's the brief version.
We just want to also add that on Wednesdays is the time when we will be doing a deep clean of our schools, because that we will be in between groups of students. That's why the students are back to back on the days that they're attending, so that we can keep the cohorts together and then do a deep clean of the school on starting in the morning and going through the evening. So Mr. Stoltzfus, you're up.
I just want to add, go right ahead. Just want to add, because it looks like it's just sort of cut off from the slide, that Group C is representing those students who would be coming in on all 4 of those days, students who receive related special education services.
Okay, so you'll notice the structure for the middle school is similar to the elementary school. The one difference you'll see is that we take, with our electives, we run on a 6-day cycle typically at the middle school, 6-day cycle, but as it pertains to this program, we don't want to think really as anything as day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. Rather, we want to think of it as just is it an odd day or an even day? Because whatever elective I have on day 1 in my schedule, or electives, plural if you have more than one, are the same electives you have on days 3 and 5. Whatever elective or electives you have on day 2 are the same ones you have on day 4 and 6. So in the middle school model, on Monday, Tuesday, Group A, and then again, the Group C would be those students who need specially designed instructions. It's our special ed students, students who need services provided are invited all 4 days. But Group A is Monday, Tuesday, with Monday being looked at as an odd day and Tuesday being an even day. So if I typically have my every other day ELA on days 1 through 5, I will see that class on Monday. And then opposite of that on days 2, 4, 6, I would have chorus. Then I'll see that teacher on Tuesday. And then we simply flip that for Thursday, Friday. Group A is remote Thursday, Friday, and Group B now is in school, in session, with the same thing. The first day, Thursday, being their odd day electives, and the second day, Friday, being the even day electives. Wednesday for us, the way we'll do that, because this is the time for some small group sessions, for some office hours, for supports to be provided, for teachers to invite students in for a little extra help if they think they might need it. If there's a student who's been absent for one or both of their days that week or the previous week, they can maybe get some smaller group time or even some individual time with them on Wednesday. But the way we will arrange that is that will switch every other week. So one week, the electives for Wednesday will be odd days. The next week, it'll be even days. Following third week, odd days, and so forth in that way. So when students are thinking, I don't know if this Wednesday is when I meet with this teacher or the other teacher, it'll be based upon whether that's an odd week or an even week for Wednesdays. And we will communicate that out on a weekly basis so that families are aware of that.
All right. Mr. Richardson, are you up? Thank you.
Hello again, Mr. Richardson from the high school. You'll notice that our high school plan is very similar for blended as to that of the middle school. Getting a note, is this on? Can you hear?
If Mr. Richardson, you can just sit there at that microphone and just the center button turns the microphone on.
Okay, how's that? Okay, so our plan is very similar to that of the middle school. We have a split schedule with half of the students coming in Monday and Tuesday. They'll be following their regular schedule. So the schedules they have now, as Mrs. Slade said earlier, are the same schedules they'll be following. They already have their classes. So Monday and Tuesday, you'll have group A in, and they'll be in for in-person instruction, while group B is learning remotely. All of the kids that are in the Cyber Academy are also learning remotely at that time. This lines up again with the middle school schedule, except for we have a 1 through 5 day schedule. Our students follow days 1 through 5 so that they don't disproportionately miss a lab day or classes that they might have only 2 days a week, as Mondays are typically days that we have off during the year. So during any 5-week cycle, they're going to hit all of their classes, not disproportionately miss any one class. Again, these are the same classes as the cyber students are taking. So all the students' schedules right now, say for first period Algebra 2 class, those are all the students that are in that class. Some will be live Monday, Tuesday, some will be home virtually and then come in for Thursday, Friday, and some are full-time cyber. Same instruction by the same teacher, same class for all those students. And that's one of the big advantages of this model. The other thing to note in this model is instruction is not repeated. So your students that are coming in on Monday and Tuesday, when they're home Thursday and Friday, the instruction doesn't repeat, it moves forward. They're taking the class remotely on those days. Much like the middle school, we have that group of students that have IEPs. They will be attending on all 4 of those days, so we'll call those our Group C students. So kind of to summarize, you have 4 days of instruction for all students, and then we have that Wednesday in the middle where we have asynchronous learning, independent learning day, teacher office hours, special help for students during that day before we repeat back into the 2 days on and 1 day off schedule. And I believe that's it.
I have a question. So how many students will be coming in on Wednesdays then, our special needs? Guesstimate. If everybody comes to school, what would that number be about?
So on Wednesday, we're not expecting students to be in the building. They'll be in on the 4 days, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. And we're expecting that if you split our school in half, you're down to about 850 students, and then some portion of those will be enrolled in the cyber school, so that may drop, at this point we don't really know, but maybe several hundred or more students. So a typical class that could have anywhere from 20 to 31 students in it would be down to say, around 15 students, which you can distance in the classrooms that we have. And that's one of the big goals of having this blended plan, having roughly half the students in on any given day.
I have just a general question. If I understand this correctly, this elementary school students and the middle school students, when they are at home, they are in an asynchronous schedule, but the high school is using a synchronous model for when those students are home. They are too?
Yes.
Okay. I look at this doesn't say that, just says remote. Okay. So the elementary school students are the only ones that are asynchronous when they're home. And if they are home and they're accessing their remote lessons, if they have issues or problems or anything during that work time, can they communicate with the teacher? Or, because that teacher is obviously in school with other students.
I have a question on accommodation for, there are going to be families that are going to find this very difficult. Is there an option in the group C to have families that might not have IEPs or other special needs, but feel that their schedules make it impossible for them to keep their children at home on the other days? I just want to know if there's some accommodation for those students.
At this time, we don't know, because it has all to do with the number of
Correct.
seats in the class,
Okay.
so that we can be properly physically distanced between students. So not at this time. We'd have to get up and running before we can actually see how many students are physically in classes.
Okay.
Just to go back to your question about that Wednesday, there's a lot of detail that has to be worked out with parent feedback, staff feedback, but part of those routines would consist of checking in with students, because there would be some synchronous type activities going on, as well as the asynchronous part of the day. So there would be check-ins and live check-ins and some feedback throughout. If you think about it, could also be a time for small group instruction, could be a time for teachers to do counseling or one-on-one or all the related services that you can think of. That's also a time period that could be utilized. Those details, a granular detail, has to be worked out with staff, though.
Okay. You know, just one final thing that I need to clarify. You said this, but I wasn't following. What is the rationale for having it be Monday and Tuesday instead of like Monday, Thursday, Tuesday, Friday in the way the students attend? I know you said something, but.
So the rationale is that we want to have that opportunity to clean in between the cohorts of students that are attending. And so that's why it is on a Wednesday. If we went by the cycle day, then that cycle day rotates throughout the year and it falls at all different times. And so we wanted to be able to clean the space after the cohort of students then left the space.
Okay, and final question. If we use this model and we have 50% about approximately of the students at school at any given time, are they going to be able to use common spaces like the cafeteria and things like that, rather than have to eat lunch in the classrooms, those other things that we've been discussing?
So that is part of the numbers. So that's really just up to the numbers. So that would always be the ideal. So it will just depend on how many students are enrolled in the program.
But it's also important to remember that if the governor continues minimum of 25, a gathering of 25 people indoors, then we can only have 25 people in the cafeteria. And so that has to take into effect all the adults that are supervising the children as well.
Okay, do we have other questions from the board?
I was just going to go on to that other.
Okay, go on. Yep.
So we, like the Cyber Academy, we do have parent information sessions scheduled on those very same days as the cyber options. They're just at different times. So again, July 29th and 30th, August 4th and 5th. We will have opportunities for parents to learn more about this part of our reopening plan with Zoom links for elementary, middle, and high school. And just like that cyber opportunity for registration, same thing. When parents do the annual registration that they do each year in Skyward, they would be selecting that they wanted to be part of blended. And we would also be asking if they are going to be coming here in person, if they are going to be coming blended, we'd like to know if they plan to use district transportation, if they plan to have their student on the school bus. And finally, have that same information that we talked about before. There is additional equipment in our classrooms in order to make this work for our students and teachers, the things that we already talked about, as well as support for the students and teachers for using that technology.
Okay, I know we're over time, so do we have any questions from board members that we have not answered yet?
Just a quick clarification. So especially with middle school and high school, if I sign up as a cyber student, as a middle or high schooler, and then want to go to the blended option and vice versa, this is a really easy way I can move between, you know, full cyber and go right into the blended, and I'm with the same teacher with the same cohort of students. So it's a really easy transition in and out of that, depending on how the circumstances go.
Designed to be flexible.
Right. And then in a world where COVID, you know, goes down what we all hope it does, and in the spring, if we can go back to real, you know, full, you know, 5-day-a-week school, kids could just roll right back into classrooms, and we could still potentially even have a cyber option for families who aren't quite there yet, and you're still in the same cohort and haven't missed any beats with the curriculum at Owen J. Roberts. So this is a very good option for parents with a lot of flexibility versus something outside the districts, which ends up costing the district a lot of taxpayer dollars if you look to something that doesn't have near the benefits or the flexibility that this does. So I'm really happy how much work you guys put into this, and the flexibility in it. It's really good.
I also would like to just take a few moments to thank, I think the administrative team has done an incredible job in this time, and with the changing and fluidity of needs. I just want to thank everybody, and I know there is still more work to do, and we're not really going to know exactly what it looks like, but I think the administrative team has done a phenomenal job.
We would like to invite any of our school board members that have the opportunity in the next couple of weeks to visit one of either French Creek, the middle school, or the high school, so that you can see this already taking place here during ESY. And so our principals are happy for you to be able to see it. I know Mrs. DiMarino, you had a chance to see it, and Mr. Friel did as well, and I think Mrs. Stutzman viewed it from the other side while at home with her student. And so we would invite any of our board members to be able to come in and see it firsthand.
Yeah, it was really impressive. It was good, and I think Mr. Deal did have his hand up. Just I'm not sure if he still does.
At this time, any school board members that have additional questions, if you would raise your hand, Mr. San Francisco will unmute your mic. And Mr. Deal, you're unmuted at this time.
Thanks, Dr. Lloyd. Just a quick question. Let's say we go through the enrollment process and so many kids sign up for Cyber Charter that you would be able to open a school 5 days a week with social distancing. Would you opt for that, or would that kind of screw up the flow of what you're doing across the district?
So it was really exact language. And so we would go back and look at it again to see if we could in fact do a 5-day model if we were at 50% attendance in school. So we could go back and we could look at it again. We could look at what Mrs. Booth was suggesting about if there's other students that could attend more days. But until we know who is enrolling in cyber, we can't make those decisions.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Okay, Mrs.
Can you
Prophet
hear me okay?
has a question.
So just for clarity for parents, for the open houses, they're a session for parents to get more information and to also get questions answered?
Yes, so during those Zoom sessions, we're going to be presenting similar information. There'll be a live chat. And so parents will be able to go right onto the live chat. We have a person assigned to be a facilitator for that, who will basically interrupt the speaker and ask questions for anyone who has a question during that time.
And if they have additional questions after that, I think building
They can
principal.
email or call, no problem.
Okay.
Okay, so we're over our time. I just am looking at Mrs. Prophet to ask if you would, if we should ask the public for questions, or do we need to move on?
I think Mrs. Munson might have a question. We just need to sanitize the microphone.
Hopefully this is an easy one. If students in the same house have different last names and some of them are sorted into A and some of them are sorted into B, do we have a way to move that
We
around?
did. We're going to be using the oldest child's last name.
All right, you've already thought of it. Awesome.
All right, we're going to have to move on to pupil services. So any other additional questions we have from the public, we do have all those open houses. You can always email or call. I'm sure we'd be happy to get those questions answered for you. So yeah, we're gonna move on.
So for those of you that have joined this evening, if you would like to be able to view Dr. Soder's presentation, you can go to the district's homepage, and up at the top under the banner, you will see a link for the OJR Cyber Academy and for the blended model. And if you click on those links, you'll see the information that was presented tonight, and then you will also see the scheduled times where we will have not only the open house for the Cyber Academy, but where there is also the information sessions that are happening across the district that you'll be able to participate in online. As always, the principals welcome your email with your questions, and as do I and the school board. We're going to switch seats. So Mrs. Booth and Mrs. DiMarino, you're going to have to sanitize the area you're sitting in, or else the board members that are taking a seat can sit up here where no one has been seated. But I think we're going to need one of those, possibly need one of those seats sanitized. So for the public, please bear with us. We will be moving on to the Pupil Services Committee meeting.
The board members joining us through Zoom could turn on their videos, please. Thank you.
Okay. It's all right. I can do both. I think so. Yeah, I can. I don't. Okay. We're ready.
All right, so we're going to call the Pupil Services meeting to order. First item on the agenda is approval of meeting minutes. So meeting minutes were from January 27th. We had missed one because we haven't had a Pupil Services meeting in a while. And then meeting minutes from June 11th. I just need, we need to motion those, right, to approve? You get to turn your microphone.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All right, thank you.
I can't get to the agenda though.
All right, so before we move on to item 3, and I turn this over to Dr. Lloyd, I just want to give a brief background on where this plan came from. So this is our first draft of the fall health and safety plan. This started as our summer health and safety plan that we first introduced on June 11th, and it has undergone many changes. Part of these changes came from changes in guidelines and new guidelines that have been released. Part of these changes came from the experiences we had as we started our journey with ESY this summer. A third part of these changes came from our focus groups that parents participated in. I just want to explain and reinforce the fact that this document is fluid and will continue to be fluid. As our guidelines change, we will need to be nimble and update our plan. Our goal is the safety of our students and our staff. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Lloyd now.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Prophet. This is going to be a little tricky because I now need to move to operating the Zoom meeting and the presentation at the same time. So please bear with me on this. The school board has seen the plan presented 3 times. The plan was originally presented back in June in order for us to be able to begin athletics and then an ESY as well as kinder camp and jumpstart. So the summer plan served as the base for the fall reopening plan. And so we've been modifying this plan throughout the past couple of months, and each time we've had a revision, we've come before the board and we've presented the plan. So we will not be presenting the whole plan tonight. What we will be presenting is the input that we've received from the community and from our staff that will be implemented for the fall. I know that you emphasized that this is a draft. I think that we need to think of this as it's going to be a draft all year. The guidance is continually changing. Just today, right before I came over here, there's another change. And so I know that as I talked to many people across the district, we had well over 300 people that joined our focus groups, and that some of the information that we shared last week has already changed. So we appreciate your patience with this process. It is not like anything I have ever experienced in my whole career. What we need folks to know is, and I have it highlighted here in yellow, is that at any point during the implementation of the plan, if the governor or the Department of Health issues a mandate, just like the governor did last week, that supersedes the entire plan. So those of you that have that are joining us this evening know that we had drafted the plan, and then the governor mandated face coverings, and that was not included in the plan, and that has certainly been added, and you'll see that here this evening. One of the items that folks asked for was for us to add hyperlinks to the documents so that you could go right to the research that the plan is based off of, or any of the resources. I did include the information for the Chester County Department of Health. We need everyone to understand that The Chester County Department of Health has direct oversight of the school district, and so therefore all of their recommendations have been included in the plan, and we'll be talking about one major change after I met with them today. So the plan talks about how in the red phase, schools will be closed, and in the yellow and green phases, we may provide in-person instruction. And so I know that some parents are wondering, why are we trying to provide any in-person instruction? And the reason is because this is where the guidance comes from, that we must develop a plan that provides for in-person instruction. Here you see the links to the Department of Education's information that we have received. The type of opening that we are looking at is a scaffolded reopening, where some students are engaged in in-person learning and others are engaged in distance learning. We were required to develop a pandemic coordinating team, so that's included in here. And then we had several thousand parents and employees participate, and so there's a hyperlink that includes the names of all of those individuals that provided us with feedback and input on the plan. So just your name, don't worry, we didn't include your email or anything like that. So as I'm going through here, these are different strategies that they had talked about. And so the first area of the plan is the cleaning, sanitizing, disinfecting, and ventilation. We included the links to the ASHRAE standards that are recommended for school openings. So those of you that are interested in the types of cleaning products and the ventilation, ventilation specifically, you can read about the recommendations that are there for schools. Anytime you see the highlighted yellow area, this is where we revise the plan based on the feedback from the community and from our teaching staff. We will be adding housekeeping to our daytime, which usually our housekeepers are here in the evening, and so we'll have housekeepers and maintenance workers that will be cleaning throughout the day. One of the recommendations that we received was to reduce the number of high-touch surfaces by leaving classroom doors open and by leaving the gang bathroom doors to the hallway open so that everybody does not have to touch the handles of the door. That's a great suggestion. We also wanted to add to the plan that every classroom, every space in the school district will have hand sanitizer, disinfectant spray, and paper towels that will be accessible. That way our teachers do not need to be providing those things. It's not to say that they won't be grateful if you send your child with hand sanitizer, or you continue to send in those Lysol wipes if you can find them. In talking with parents, they wanted to see that there was going to be a systematic disinfecting of the school throughout the day. And so we added that information out. It will be scheduled throughout the day, so as classrooms are empty, housekeepers will be able to go in and clean the rooms as well as the high-touch surfaces throughout the other parts of the district. We also will be disinfecting the playgrounds throughout the day, and then something that was recommended is a practice that we use here in the summer. If you're in any of our schools right now, you can see where our housekeepers have already cleaned. There's a notice that's posted outside the door, and so we will be implementing that throughout the school year so that teachers are able to see that their room was in fact cleaned overnight and that areas have been cleaned throughout the school day. Some recommendations with regards to transportation that were added to the plan. Students from the same family will be sitting together. That might not be ideal for everyone, but that's recommended that they sit together anyway. That our buses will be disinfected in between runs, so the high-touch areas will be wiped down, such as the seat backs and the hand railings. We added that information in there. And we just a little clarifier that in order to ventilate the buses, every third window would be open if weather is permitting. We added some information here, it's not highlighted, about musical instruments. We had several parents point out to us that the information regarding musical instruments was not included in the plan. And so we are grateful for our music teachers for looking at the guidance from PMEA and including that information about how instruments will be cleaned using 70% alcohol wipes by the students. So as we move on to in the event of an emergency, that means that if we had somebody that tested positive for COVID, we would close off the area immediately. The sick person would be isolated, and that area would be disinfected. Those processes are detailed here a little later on. As far as the physical distancing of school protocols, one of the things that I want to mention is that this has greatly changed. We anticipated that tonight we would be talking to you about being able to fully reopen, but the governor has really thrown us a curveball with last week's guidance that only 25 people be able to gather indoors. That greatly restricts what we're going to be able to do in the fall, along with the 6 feet of physical distance that he has imposed on businesses. I know that the guidance only says businesses, but I think that we would be foolish to not start to take this into consideration. Thus the reason that you're hearing about the hybrid plan here tonight. So when we talk about physical distance, I highlighted this area about individual students' desks will be forward facing within 3 to 6 feet of separation. I added the note. A lot of people were asking, well, where's that information coming from? And so I added a hyperlink to the Chester County Health Department's guidance on page 5 that we have on our webpage so that parents could see that that's their recommendation along with the American Academy of Pediatrics. However, like I said before, that if the governor or the Department of Health issues a mandate, that supersedes whatever we have in our plan. And so today, what I learned while I was with the Chester County Department of Health is that they are walking back on that 3 feet at this time because of the increasing cases in Chester County. So we're going to need to be watching very closely the information that is coming out from the Department of Health because, as I said, they have direct oversight of school districts. And so we're going to need to watch that as well as what the governor is saying and the Department of Health with the State Department of Health. Parents asked for details about cubbies and at the elementary, how were cubbies going to be managed? And so we're going to need to be limiting the number of students that are using the cubbies for their backpacks during the days, but teachers are masterful at creating routine for these type of things, but we will certainly need to take that into consideration. We added information about safety drills. We are mandated to do safety drills, and so we will need to continue to do them, but we will need for our students to be physically distanced and wearing masks while we are doing them. We're not off the hook for any of the mandates at this point in time. With regards to lunch, parents had asked us about how are we going to be serving lunch and assure that students are physically distanced. And so we will be moving away from the model that we're currently using where everybody comes through the line and it's a la carte. We will have, we'll be serving individually plated meals and boxed lunches once school reopens. Students are always welcome to pack lunch as well. With regards to hygiene practices, at the elementary level, this can be very routine for our students, not so much at the secondary level, but we will have well-established hand washing routines for when students arrive in the morning, prior and after snacks, lunch, and recess, but we did add this clarifier in thanks to the suggestion of parents that once our students go to another classroom or a special area, we like to call it at the elementary, if they go to their music class or their the library or the cafeteria, they will sanitize their hands upon entering that classroom, because as we know, young children, when they walk down the halls, they like to touch everything that's on the way, and so they will sanitize their hands upon arrival in the classroom. All of that will be provided to each teacher. With regards to identifying, restricting non-essential visitors and volunteers, we did add some additional information here that any visitor to the school must have a face covering to enter. There's two phases here. The second column here is the yellow phase, and this is the green phase. I was just joking today that I think we're like in the lime green phase, because we're somewhere between green and yellow right now, based on the restrictions that the governor just put in place. So in the yellow phase, there would be no volunteers and visitors would be restricted. However, we do from time to time need to have individuals come in to perform maintenance in our schools. Those individuals will need to have face coverings. They will also have their temperatures checked to make sure that they are able to enter. In the green phase, this is where we will be permitting volunteers, and so the same thing is true for visitors and volunteers, that they will need to wear face coverings and they would need to have their temperature checked. Moving on to recess, parents pointed out to us that we were perhaps more restrictive in the green phase than we needed to be. In the yellow phase, we will not be permitting students to play on the playground. We will have a staggered recess throughout the day, allowing one class at a time on the playground. So the same thing's true for the green phase. All students will still have recess. It's a very important part to child development and a much needed break during the school day. In the green phase, we will be allowing students to use the playground, one class, one cohort at a time. But again, that goes back to that staggering the classes that are out to recess. We will not be able to send a whole grade level out to recess like we have in the past. This section called Unique Needs of Music Program to Address Hygiene, Disinfectant of Equipment. This is a new section that was added, as I mentioned before. Parents noted that we did not address the unique needs of students that play instruments, and so in here we have included information about the types of masks that students will wear that play wind instruments, and that we will, while the weather is warm, our students will have the opportunity to have music and band instruction outside, because that's where the best ventilation is. And then if they have to be indoors, our students would need to be physically distanced 9 feet apart from each other. Sorry, trying to let people into that are in the waiting room into the group at the same time. We'll have bells on the instruments that will need them. An example of that would perhaps be a trombone or a saxophone, and so we have special covers for those types of instruments. Spit valves will need to be emptied into what are called puppy pads and properly discarded, and then again, the cleaning of the instrument, the student will need to use a 70% alcohol wipe to clean their own instrument. We talked before about students not sharing materials, but we also need to be realistic about this at the same time, that there are some materials that elementary students would need to share, as well as high school students. I use the example of a microscope. We don't have one microscope for every student. And so if students are sharing materials, we have disposable gloves, and students would then wear a pair of gloves and then throw them away at the end of the class period there. Again, we've added information about cleaning. As was pointed out, students are going to need to share paintbrushes, and they're going to need to share balls, and in music class maybe there's a tambourine, and so all of those things would need to be sanitized. Our older students are perfectly capable of doing that themselves, but our younger students, the teachers would need to be responsible for that. So there is truly some sharing of materials. There just won't be the sharing of pencils and crayons and calculators. Within regards to staggering the use of communal spaces, one of the things that we did add is the one-way traffic patterns. At the elementary level, this can be achieved very easily and up and down staircases. And then we also added the word systematically, again, about cleaning the high-touch areas. Under transportation, we will be encouraging parents to transport students to school so that we can reduce the number of students that are on the school buses. And then we will be promoting physical distancing and face coverings at bus stops. Parents wanted some clarification about when 250 people are allowed to gather. And so as you know, right now, 250 people can only gather outdoors. So we will not be having any assemblies at this particular time, but we would be able to have 250 people outdoor. An example of why we would need this in the plan is if we have a fire drill, the entire school exits the building. And so there most likely will be 250 people on any given side of a school building once it exits. Other social distancing information that we added here is that we want to ensure physical distancing in our offices and our faculty rooms and other meetings that we're having. And unfortunately, we will not be able to have field trips, and our staff will not be able to travel to conferences this year. The middle school and the high school plan is very similar. It's customized for the middle school and the high school, but the areas that were added are very similar. We are able to get a little bit more space between desks at the high school, but again, with the governor's new guidance, we would need to be looking at 6 feet, which means we can only accommodate about half of our students in a classroom at any one time. With regards to the cafeteria, we again here would be serving individually plated meals and boxed lunches. We will be using all available space in order to be able to serve lunch because of the limit of 25 individuals in a class right now. If that is lifted, then we can go back to, we could possibly use our cafeteria, but again, we would need to have students 6 feet apart, and they cannot sit across from each other while they are eating. We did add some information under hygiene practices. Parents were not comfortable with the wording just to encourage hand washing, but these are middle school and high school students, so it's not like we can line them up at a sink and have them wash their hands. So students will have to use hand sanitizer upon arrival in a classroom or a lab or the cafeteria or the auditorium or the gym, any of those areas of the school. They will need to sanitize their hands upon arrival in the classroom, because after all, other people will have been there and used that space. We've already talked about restricting of visitors and volunteers. We did add some information here on handling of physical education classes. This would also include middle school swimming, because swimming will continue, but we will have to give special consideration to lockers and students accessing the locker rooms and the number of students accessing the locker rooms. Lockers will need to be assigned so that students maintain that 6 feet of physical distance between each other. This is the section where we added the information about musical instruments, same as the elementary, information about sharing of materials. We need to think of desks as a shared material at the middle school and high school level because of students changing classes. And so at the end of each class, students will need to disinfect themselves, or as we'll be saying, you need to clean up after yourself. Parents will appreciate us reinforcing cleaning up after yourself. So our students will need to disinfect their desk prior to leaving the classroom. That way it is prepared for the student that will be coming in. We've added the wording about wearing disposable gloves anytime we've got to share equipment. And then just like a desk, if a student does use a computer and not their own Chromebook, we would be looking for students to clean the computer surfaces as well before they left. In the high school, this is more of a concern than in the middle school than this is at an elementary school. We will need to monitor the school to ensure staff and students do not commune in hallways, and that we may actually have to close off some areas if we find that students are gathering and not moving on to their classroom. Parents had a lot of questions about how we were going to be prohibiting students from gathering. So we added that into our plan, as well as backpacks. We will be permitting backpacks in our classrooms to reduce students congregating at lockers. We will be staggering lockers, so it's not that students won't have a locker, but we will be permitting backpacks, which we don't currently do in our middle school. Again, we'll be promoting physical distancing and face coverings at bus stops. With regards to the middle school and the high school, parents wanted to know more about why we would be permitting 250 students in the auditorium or large groups of students in the cafeteria. And so it wasn't that we were thinking so much as having assemblies, because there will be no assemblies, and there's no outdoor gatherings larger than 250, but we are going to need to use our auditorium possibly as a place for students to eat. If we are not able to use the cafeteria, we also will need a space where our band can socially distance in order for them to rehearse if we're not able to be outside with the band. And so that's the reason that that's in there, is really that we're going to use that space, not that we're having assemblies. We will be encouraging students that are eligible to drive to school in order to reduce the number of students that are on school buses. That's not our typical procedure. So I'm sure that many of our students will be excited to be able to drive sooner than later. And same information, no field trips and no staff travel. The next section has to do with athletics. This is new information that was added, not necessarily from parents, but information keeps changing that comes out from the PIAA. And so outdoor activities, contact drills are permitted, and full team activities indoors, though we are currently limited to only groups of 25. That's making for some challenging preseason conditioning right now, since we can only have 25 people indoors. Just some information about the daily cleaning for the sports that there's team balls and those needing to be cleaned. And then parents had a lot to say about no spectators being at our sporting events, and what we need our parents to understand is that this is the governor's order and we must comply with the governor's orders. If that changes, then we will be permitted to permit spectators at our events. Just moving on through, just a reminder that if you are joining us late here in the conversation, we're not going over every aspect of this plan, because this plan has been presented to the school board at 3 different meetings. And so we're just simply looking at the feedback and input that parents gave to us. When we come to the monitoring of student and staff health, this is information that has come directly to us from the Chester County Health Department. And so the components that you are seeing here as far as how we will be monitoring the students and the staff come from the health department. I did include some links, and I'm going to ask Mr. San Francisco to help me out here, or Mr. Cicito, if you could help us out. What I want parents to to be aware is that in the plan and on our webpage is information about symptom monitoring. I foresee that this is something you're going to need to have on your refrigerator because you're going to need to be very familiar with what are the symptoms that I am looking for in my child or in members of my family. We might not be able to pull this up because we are using the laptop. Oh, there it is. So we have if you can just scroll down for a little bit there, we have on our webpage a section that is specific to the summer. You scroll to the top a little bit more of the webpage. So up in here in the banner, you can see where it says summer, fall, reopening. The pointer, the mouse is there. If you open that, that's where you're going to find the details for symptom monitoring. Because we're gonna, I'm sure all know this by the time school opens on the symptoms that we are looking for. It also gives you the detail about the type of thermometer that you might be using to take your child's temperature. So that information is there. I'm also going to draw your attention while we are here to additional information on the exclusion from and return to school. So while we have this open, we'll go there. We added these links into the plan so that parents will have easy access, so that our principals will have easy access to this information. And so this is the document provided to us by the Chester County Health Department with regards to exclusion from and return to school. And there's a variety of scenarios that are here that will tell you if you have COVID symptoms, are you excluded from school, when can you return to school, and there's a bunch of different scenarios that are here. In talking to the Chester County Health Department, they will be updating this information for us within the next couple of weeks, so more to come. I will send this information out to you separate from the plan as in the next couple of weeks, but it is going to change. We can go back to the other, to the Word document. And that is one thing we can be certain, is that it is going to change, because it changes every week, and sometimes it changes twice in a week. So those links are now in the plan here, and so you can, it talks about symptom monitoring, and how we're asking you to do it, and how we will be doing it throughout the day. We'll be very vigilant, and our teachers and staff will all be trained in what to look for, and students will be heading to the nurse. There's additional information in here, because I know that many of you are concerned about, well, what if my child has seasonal allergies? That information is included in the plan as well, but we've presented it before, so we won't be presenting that information again tonight. We did add in some new information that came out from the Chester County Health Department, that one of the things that we need to consider is that people will be tested for COVID, and they will return to school instead of quarantining. And so in the event that that does occur, that we are notified that an individual has COVID and they are in the school, that we added the procedure about those individuals discreetly being isolated, and then parents will either be called, or if it's an employee, the employee would be sent home. Again, there's lots of links in here so that you can find the information very easily. More links about returning if you're isolated. This is some new information that was added about notifying families. Many parents wanted more detail in the plan about the notifications that they would receive, and when would they be receiving those notifications. When the Chester County Health Department notifies us that there is a presumptive case, we will be sending you a letter to let you know that there's a presumptive case in the school We got some great feedback at the middle school about developing those letters, but that's not the type of detail for this plan. This is a very broad plan to cover for the whole district. Those nitty-gritty details don't go in the plan. And so if there's a presumptive case, then we will be notifying you of that. We won't be notifying families every time somebody's tested because we don't necessarily know that information, but we do get notified if the health department thinks there's a presumptive case. If the Chester County Health Department notifies us that there is a confirmed case, meaning that somebody that was in the school was tested positive for COVID, then you'll receive a phone call from me, my automated phone call letting you know, and then we will be closing the school so that we can thoroughly clean the school with the electrostatic sprayer. And so this is where the detail about how we're going to communicate with you. From there, the Chester County Health Department then does contact tracing. I did receive some information from them about contact tracing that we'll be able to add to the plan, and I'll be able to send to you. And so they will then start their investigation of contact tracing. We will be providing them with the names of all of the children and staff members that came in contact with the infected person. And then our school nurse will call you if your child needs to quarantine based on what the health department has told us, and our building principals will notify employees if they need to be quarantined. So the health department will give us that information, and they're very good about staying in touch with us. This is just some more information about contact tracing and some links for that as well. So some other considerations, and this is definitely a talking point for the board, is that to conduct temperature checks. Many parents we heard from want us to do mass temperature checks. This is not technology that we currently have in the school district, and so this is a conversation I need to have with the school board about this. So if we just hold this thought, I'm going to come back to it. I just want to review the other parts of the plan that parents gave feedback on. This area is in yellow because this is a discussion point that we need to have with the board. As everybody knows, the Department of Health has mandated face coverings, and that's face coverings for everybody. And so we are required to have students wear face coverings. Our staff certainly will. I've included the link to that information so people can read that requirement for themselves. Most of the conversation that we had in our focus groups and the information that people added to their survey had to do with the face coverings, partially because the mandate was not captured in the plan. It's actually, we've copied the mandate here as it relates to schools, and students must wear them at all times unless they're outside, and they can be physically distanced more than 6 feet. Otherwise, students are expected to wear them at all times, including on the bus. There's some exceptions to this, and I think by now people are well aware that there are some exceptions. However, it's important for families to be aware that if your child cannot wear a mask due to a documented medical condition, that you will need to provide that documentation to the school. Many of our families, we already have this documentation for your child, particularly if they're one of our special education students. But for other students, you would need to provide that documentation to the school, and then we would need to convene a meeting to determine if we need to develop a 504 plan for your child. I've included information here because parents had so many questions around this. I included the information about where the school gains its authority to ask parents for this medical documentation, and it's in section 504, and IDEA is where the school draws its authority to require the medical documentation. And then this is information that just came out this week from the Department of Education that if a student does not have a valid medical excuse for wearing a face covering, then school districts will be expected to enroll that student in their virtual learning program that they have. So I know a lot of parents were concerned about students not coming to school with masks and exposing their child. This has since changed since last week, where school districts had no authority to information that now gives authority to schools to require students to wear a mask to school in order to protect our teachers and protect the other students. So with that said, we added information to the plan about students being provided the opportunity to take what they're calling a face covering break or a face mask break throughout the day. Students will be allowed to remove their face covering or their mask, obviously when they're eating or drinking, as long as they're 6 feet apart, which our students will be sitting 6 feet apart. And then if they are seated at desks or assigned to a workspace that's at least 6 feet apart, they're able to take a mask. That doesn't mean that they don't have to wear the mask. They're able to take a mask break. And any of us sitting in this room right now are in much need of a mask break after, you know, being with one on for so long. And then just a little bit of other information about when engaging in an activity where it would be unsafe to wear a mask, such as operating any kind of equipment. That's in here because there is a possibility of that we would have students that would be doing that in some of our other courses. From this point on, the plan talks about all of the professional development that our staff will need to undergo at the beginning of the school year. We've also included information about the trainings that we will be providing for our students, and then how we're going to communicate out the plan. And so you can see we've been working on this since June the 11th, which was the first time that we presented the draft plan to the board with the committee that people that developed it, and then we revised the plan after the board gives us input on the plan. We've made some revisions, and then it went back out to the board. And so this just details all of that work that was done, and then all of the work that we will need to continue to do to continue to develop the plan, because it is very fluid, and we will need to be monitoring and updating the plan, certainly as guidance comes from the health department and as guidance is coming from PDE. So I'm going to return to this area that is the real talking point for this evening. I know the board is going to, the committee is going to have an opportunity to ask questions, but this is the part of the plan that we really need to discuss and give me some direction on where you want me to go with regards to conducting temperature checks using a technology that we don't currently have. I believe that Mrs. Crumrine is on the call and has information for the board about the cost and the different technology that's out there. So we will help her to get up on the screen. So Mrs. Prophet, if you want to start that conversation off, Mr. San Francisco will work on getting Mrs. Crumrine.
Sure. So I know that the Finance Committee asked for costs from this, and Mrs. Crumrine had provided that to the Finance Committee. So they're going to have to also weigh in on their thoughts with this. I mean, I know it's a concern for the public, and it's definitely a concern for us too, and just ensuring that everyone is safe. So we're happy to continue looking at that. I think the Finance Committee will definitely need to weigh in as well.
Okay, I see that. I see Mr. Friel is. Well, no, Mr. Friel needs to be up there because he's the Finance Committee chair. And so if you unmute Mr. Friel, Mr. Friel will be able to participate in the conversation with the Pupil Services Committee. I just want to pause for a moment. I feel like I'm gasping now that I have the mask on and I'm talking at the same time. what I want the folks that are joining us tonight, this is your first time joining a school board committee meeting. This is a working session. And so this is where these sessions that you're seeing tonight are not like a school board meeting. This is where the board really gets their work done. And so they're talking, they talk about issues and they debate back and forth about the work of the school district. And so this is a great example to see the board at work. So who would you like to hear from, Mrs. Prophet?
Well, I think Mrs. Carmine, if she can start with what she's looked at.
So Mrs. Crumrine, if you would go ahead and share with everybody, you're going to probably need to speak up so that we're able to hear you.
Okay, Dr. Lloyd, are you able to hear me clearly?
Yes, we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay, great. Yes, and we just pulled together some options of different types of temperature screening devices. And as you can imagine, they range greatly from the type of the device and the speed and the accuracy. And it all really goes with price. So you have handheld devices that our nurses are using and some of our athletics are using, which range, between $50 and $100, just broadly for those devices. And then you can move on to some other types of devices that are kiosk or iPad related. They can range anywhere from $829 to like, I don't know, $6,700 or so. I don't have the document in front of me. And then there are they're screening devices that are meant for mass crowds. So they are more camera and they're mass screening devices. And those are ranging from our research from about $13,500 to $20,000 or more per device. So that just gives you a very broad idea. And the larger mass screening devices, they can, as a large crowd is coming in through an entryway, it really just scans and it can detect in a second whether there is a temperature or not. And there's a lot more to this than just screening temperatures. There's, where would we want those devices when there is a hot or a temperature. There needs to be protocol in place for that. So someone needs to be monitoring that. So those are some of the considerations, and you can figure about a second per individual when you're coming through a mass screening device. So that's a very broad overview, and I certainly plan on sending that additional information out to all the board members and board line so that you can, take a look at this and discuss. But that's really the general information to at least start the discussion.
For the mass screening, I assume students just walk single file through a archway or something, or how does that work?
It doesn't really have to be single file. People can, and you have to be careful because we really should be socially distancing when we're entering the building, right? So it can really take the temperature of the crowd that's coming through, individually.
Like what length of coming through? Like,
Our
10...
entryways would, it would be sufficient for our entryways.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Where our students would be entering the buildings. I mean, we don't have any of these devices right now. And I did speak with Mr. San Francisco about this a little bit, and we may need to add some drops, maybe some wiring. It's nothing that couldn't be managed. We could manage that if the board was interested in moving in any of those directions.
So that's $20,000 for middle school, high school, and then all the elementaries.
Well, it would be, there are two devices that look like they would fit our school, and one's about 13.5 and the other ones are like 19. Now, granted, you can go much higher than that, but that price range seems that it may work. And we have more research to do, right? Because we just started looking at this last week. We have some more research to do, but that price range, and that is really per device. So you really need to think about, maybe in the elementary schools, one entrance would be fine. But we do have separate entrance for childcare. What would we want to do there? That's another consideration. And then in the middle school and the high school, you have more entry points. So we would need to take a close look at, and obviously we would work with the principals on that, how many devices would be warranted in order to screen them effectively.
Do we know if any other school districts or institutions are using these devices, if they're taking this mass approach, or are they taking, a sampling approach with let's say the lesser temperatures, or doing it with the more vulnerable like types of stuff, like activities, like let's say the football team or something?
Ooh, I'm sorry, I don't know what happened there, but no, we could certainly survey, and Dr. Lloyd may have some idea, because I know the superintendents do meet.
Yeah, so I would be curious to see if there's a medical expert that could weigh in on this. This came out of the parent meeting, at least the one I did the focus group with the high school. And I know Mrs. Stutzman had some experience with those cameras with her work.
Mm-hmm.
So we asked, hey, let's just look into it to understand the cost. And, so it was really, a response to the focus groups. But I do think we need some expert opinion to weigh in on here. Certainly that's not me,
Me?
So I'd like to see that. I think from the concern from the finance, I think a lot of what we're driving towards here is, we want to retain the most number of students in O&J as possible, right? And that's why, the team here puts so much work into putting this hybrid and cyber program together. That's really much better option than someone choosing like one of these cyber academies, work at your own pace, which quite frankly have pretty low academic results, 40% graduation rates. And so it's not a great option if parents chose to go outside the district. Now, that's being said, we recognize the spring, is different than what's being proposed now. And I think what's being proposed now is leaps and bounds more like traditional classwork, and it's everything but sitting in the classroom. So I think it's a great leap forward, and anything we can do that could protect the safety of our students and our staff, I think is an investment that's worthwhile considering and putting in place. Especially when you consider if we don't feel, or parents don't feel like we're doing that, and they would leave and go to a cyber charter, every student that goes out is $16,000 to $22,000 per student.
Absolutely.
That's taxpayer money that leaves this district. So if you could imagine 20% of the kids leaving the district, you'd have $25-30 million of funding leaving the school district, and that's absolutely what we don't want to have happen. We want to have students retained here, and that's why, putting a cyber academy to the level that we've done here, I think is by far and away the best option for students to maintain their academics and to blend right back in when COVID, if something changes and we can go back to full-time classroom, you can do it without missing a beat. So this is just another investment in the safety of our students and staff that, I want to understand what the investment is, but also I want to understand what the medical, personnel say about it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing so far is we definitely want to bring back some more medical expertise and also see what our peer school districts are doing in this regard.
I'm also curious to see what other districts are doing. That was going to be my question, to see what's easier. And 'cause you're obviously going to have to dedicate staff to this, so just understanding what other districts are doing with this too.
Sure.
Not just school districts, because I believe there are some businesses who put these in place. I would definitely be interested in whether it is part of an effective strategy, how effective the temperature monitoring is versus other things that.
I'm also wondering about, I know there's funding that we are getting that's for COVID-19. Is there any way that any of that could be put into this type of project? But also on that line though, if you're talking about a $20,000 device per school that would have to be monitored by staff, and that seems to be a very large investment, but then how would that compare to spending $50 per classroom or whatever, for a teacher to monitor temperatures? Like, that's a lot of devices. So I don't know how those dollars and cents compare, but buying a $20,000 device for each school, that concerns me. I don't know that, like, after this COVID-19 is through, are we going to be checking temperatures forever? I'm just not sure if that's the right way to invest, but.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know that that's the right way, and that's why I want to understand, is there other strategies that maybe some of these other temperature, like sampling and hitting the vulnerable populations, or hitting the sports teams. I don't know. I am not a medical expert, so that's why I just want to see what the medical experts say about this type of stuff, and its efficacy, right? Does it even work?
We've unmuted Mr. Deal, he's the vice chair of finance.
Yeah, hi, everybody. I'm concerned just because, as Mrs. DiMarino stated, thinking about the overall expenditure. I agree with what Paul said. I am interested in whether any other schools are doing it. I am interested in whether the Chester County Health Department is recommending it. I'm also concerned that if we have them installed at the school, but kids get on the bus before they get to the school, it doesn't seem to be protecting those kids. And I think we're very concerned about asymptomatic spread, which it doesn't help with. So I have, through most of this health and safety plan, really urged that we look to the authorities, the county, the state, in terms of helping us define, in their minds, what are the steps that we should take. And I'm concerned that we might be expending a lot of money that may not provide the protection that we seek.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, John. I think it's pretty expensive to look, but let's. I think what is the best strategy for temperature taking in schools? Where does it belong? To what level? Because we're all hoping that 6 months or 8 months or 9 months from now, that's obsolete piece of equipment, right?
Right. Yeah, going back to the Chester County Health Department too, I think that resource should be tapped, because they obviously provide us with guidance. And, if we're talking about respiratory droplets and all that as being the mode of, this spread, and children are wearing face masks, then is it the right way to spend money to temperature check for as well? We'd be looking for coughing and sneezing and those sorts of things primarily, I would think. And so I would like to get guidance from them instead of, us trying to decide whether we should be taking temperatures, and whether that's worthwhile or not.
Mrs. Crumrine, Mrs. DiMarino did have one question, which was, can the COVID money that we receive from the federal government be used to cover the cost?
At this point in time, we have maximized our grant dollars with other PPE and equipment and technology and resources. So we would just be utilizing the contingency funding if the board thought that this was where the money should be spent.
Right. So I think we've got a couple points here that we need to clarity on. We need to understand, CDC guidelines. We need to understand what other districts are doing, I think, and if there's anything else out there that we should be looking at. So I think if you can come back with those points, then we can continue that discussion.
Sure, that's good feedback, and we'll gather that information for you.
The current director of the Chester County Health Department serves as an advisor for our health and safety plan, and so it's very easy for us to have a conference call with her and get some direction on that. So I think you've given us the guidance that we need to continue to explore this, but I did want to bring it to you as that this was something that we heard across the board in the feedback from parents and teachers. So Mrs. Crumrine, is there any other information that you need do we need any other direction that you need from the board at this time?
No, not at this time. Thank you, Dr. Lloyd.
All right.
So I guess then do we want to open up to committee to see if committee has any other general questions about the plan?
So while we're on the temperature checking topic, I think I had seen some reference to an app that some schools were being recommended to use for their parents to, like, every morning say, yes, I took the temperature or something like that. Can you speak to whether that's going to be part of our plan?
And did you explore that cost also, Mrs. Cremine, about the app that?
Not for the app, but I did have several discussions with Mr. San Francisco about that. And he had some ideas for alternative if that is the route that we wanted to go. So if Paul is available, he can chime in.
We can add that to our options that we're going to explore, unless you've already done some research on this, Mr. San Francisco.
It's all self-monitoring and inputting into it, so anybody can go in. There's really no check and balance of doing it. But if we wanted to do that, we could look into an app or just look into a simple Google Doc where a parent just fills that out every day and it populates right into our system where we have that tracked instead of, doing an app and then have to going forward. So we're looking at a lot of options right now on what works best for the administrators collecting that information and apps that are out there. But it seems we could do something a cost-effective way by creating something inside if that's an option that we want to go to.
I guess my only concern with that is what are we going to do with that information if parents aren't filling it out, or
right?
What are the?
Yeah, I think compliance would be pretty low after like 3 months of this. So
I don't know. I'm interested in adding one more
right.
step for parents to get their
I
kids
guess
out
the only
same thing with having parents take temperatures every day. I just don't see all of our that happening on a reliably high number.
Well, I was just thinking of it because, if our ideal situation is to keep these students off the buses so that they're not coming into contact with anybody, then it makes sense to have the checks at home. But yeah, you're right. I guess the only threat that we have is we'll put your kid in cyber school if you don't do it by some sort of frequency.
So I don't know that we need to. I don't know that we need to invest in an app. I think just encouraging that communication back and forth of what are you looking for every morning from your child in terms of symptoms, and reporting out if your child's not feeling well, them staying home, and you contacting the school and letting them know that they're going to stay home. It's going to be a lot of relying on parents.
Yeah, I think parents need to know they have a lot more flexibility this year with how their kids are feeling.
Right. Of course, the concern is the parents who don't have flexibility in their work schedule. If they're not feeling well, they could be tempted to just put them on the bus.
Yeah.
They don't have a way to really support their kids' needs at home.
But the reality is we're not going to be in a position to allow kids to come to school sick, right? With a cough, with a fever, where in the past that happens, this is going to be a point where we'd have to be inflexible with kids coming to school with symptoms and they would not be allowed to attend. And so parents will just have to know that that's just going to be the reality of this situation.
Well, the students could obviously be sent home if they show up with symptoms, but that doesn't help that bus situation. If a parent puts a student on a bus, there's going to have to be an honor system that's going to need to be respected here to some degree. I don't think we're going to be able to police every child and, like that. There's a lot of parents that if their kids are in middle school or high school aren't even up when their kids are getting on the bus. So.
But I guess that's the value that I see in having some sort of a check, whether it's a Google Doc or an app, even if we know that not every parent is going to get to it every single day. If we just try to set some expectation that they should be doing it at least once a week.
You could set it up and ask, obviously,
Yeah.
ask the parents to do it. I just don't think you can kick the kid out of school if they don't comply every day.
From an administrative perspective, do you think that's something that we would be able to manage? Like, would that go to teachers? How would something?
Well, I am questioning the legal aspect of it because it creates a student record. If you remember, there was an app that teachers like to use called Class Dojo. And we had to discontinue the use of it because it creates a student record. And so I would want to, before we explored it, we can get the information, but I also would need us to talk to our attorney to see if it's appropriate in our environment to use, because you're collecting people's medical information technically. So I think we want to look at that a little bit more to see if there's something. And so Dr. Marchini can look into that for us.
Okay. I have a question on another topic. You're talking about having no assemblies. I'm wondering, is there a possibility of having an outdoor assemblies in nice weather, and then just utilizing our outdoor space? I was talking to a couple of us about this, about just using outdoor space as much as possible. I was talking to a school, PTO, where they are creating outdoor classrooms for their elementary school, and they're going to have 5 complete outdoor classrooms, and they created them just for their own. They just wanted to have outdoor classrooms, had nothing to do with COVID-19. They're very extensive, but we might not be able to do something like that, but utilizing our outdoor space as much as possible would really alleviate kids' difficulty in school. And so maybe an outdoor assembly would be something to consider.
Can I tag on that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking in terms of, let's add tables in outdoor spaces if we have the ability to let students eat outside. Of course, my high school daughter pointed out that a high school student will sit on the ground if they want to eat outside, but
True, they will,
maybe hand washing stations outside, if that would help. Tents for temporary classroom space. It mentioned like for the band.
Tents are kind of expensive, I know, but
yeah,
if there's any way to get any shade outside at all, I think that would be a great resource that would last forever and be utilized forever, not necessarily like the temperature gauge thing that might be done with, I think it would be a great investment in the educational process altogether to have shade structures outside so that multiple classes could utilize outdoor space at one time, the band out there or whatever.
I think this is maybe a good idea for classrooms and classes, but if we're like a large assembly, I just can't see 250 students.
I was thinking the stadium for that.
Is that?
I was thinking like stadium, like if you had a speaker come, remember that one football player came, like I could just see the kids in this, like sitting in the stadium all spread out, watching something like that. That was my idea for that.
Okay. I mean, if they're walking out 6 feet apart, then that would be okay. Yeah. But lunch, I could just see, my daughter just sneaking over to her friends to talk closer. So.
Yes.
Not my daughter, someone else's daughter.
Right. My daughter?
Yes.
I hope she's watching tonight.
Well, she's downstairs. I hope she can't hear.
Other questions from the committee or from board members? If you would need to raise your hand so that Mr.
I do have
Sanford
one
can
more.
unmute you.
Since I'm sitting here, I can ask one more. I was noticing in the plan and also the CHOP article that you sent us about the whole idea of quarantining and contact tracing. Are we okay?
Yep, we're trying to get a microphone.
Anyway, so the whole idea about if a student comes in contact with another student and then the student is, if we have a positive case and we need to quarantine or contact trace students, just wanted to check on the guidelines on that because I read that the close contact would be less than 6 feet away for 15 minutes or more. So obviously, if we are maintaining 6 feet of distance in classrooms and at lunch and whatever, then we would not be having close contact or less than 6 feet away for 15 minutes or more, generally, hopefully. So I'm just kind of wondering how that whole idea of contact tracing would work, because my concern would be that I get a phone call and my kid said, or they say your child was in this classroom, and my child is saying, well, yeah, but I was at the very back and I wasn't in contact with the student at all, but now suddenly I have to quarantine for 14 days or whatever. So I'm just wondering about that, the guidelines on that and where we're going with that.
So we are waiting on that information, but I can tell you what I understand and what we've experienced, because certainly in the time that we have reopened since the end of June, we have had students that were presumptive cases, and we did not have classes of students have to quarantine because they are 6 feet apart. And so that when they ask us for that information, they want to know how close we were together. They want to know how close are they on the bus, how many students are on the bus, who's in the classroom. And so we did not have the students have to quarantine. And in my own family, where we have an individual that tested positive, I would have thought that the whole family was going to have to quarantine, but because we were not directly exposed, we didn't. And they're very responsive. That I cannot say enough about the Chester County Health Department and how responsive they were back in March and how responsive they've been since we've reopened. But you're right, it does have to do with that close proximity and prolonged exposure over time. They've been great, but I'm sure we're going to get more details on it. They did send me a flyer today that I hope to be able to send out to everybody.
Okay, thanks.
I think, oops, sorry.
I must say that I'm very grateful that we seem to live in a state and a county where they do seem to be updating the guidelines as new scientific studies come out, because these things are changing so quickly. You know, some of the horror stories we hear from other states would be even worse dealing with as a school district and a school board. And honestly, I'm feeling like buying a bottle of aspirin for anybody who had to update this plan, because I know the numbers of times you've had to go through it. It's just incredible.
Pretty soon I'll be able to tell you what page number different guidance is on for it. But the rest of the state, the counties are modeling what Chester County and Bucks County are doing. So we are fortunate to be in an area that's leading the way with getting direction, because as frustrating it is for us to have these guidelines change all the time, there are areas of our state where they have no guideline, they have no guidance. And so they have to rely on the very vague guidance that comes out from the Department of Health or from the CDC. I think Mr. DeFore has a question.
Sure. Just a few quick questions. For sports, and some of these things may be answered already, so I apologize if they have been. For sports, are we streaming them live?
So we've talked about that. We only have the ability to do it in our gym. We don't have the cameras in our stadium to do that, but we can do it in the gym if it's volleyball or basketball right now.
Okay. And do you know if we're going to continue testing in our parking lot?
So as far as the COVID testing goes, they dismantled our test site, and instead they have a mobile lab that comes and sets up. We're not scheduled right now for this week, but it moves all over the county now. We weren't getting very many people interested in it coming here, and so they dismantled it, and now the mobile one periodically. I wanted to go back to your question about sports, was that one of the things that we can do, even though we don't have that technology, is that we can look into, and talking with our athletic director, Dr. Cuthbert, is that teams could have a parent who streams the athletic events on Facebook Live. So that parents are able to do that. We saw that with wrestling last year when our wrestlers were moving to states, that we had a parent that was keeping everybody informed. So we can move to something like that.
Okay, great. I think my last question is, are we surveying students or gathering any type of student opinions during this?
And so what we were trying to get a more definitive plan. And so, even tonight, we are still very much up in the air. And I know that that's frustrating for parents, that we can't give them an answer. but the situation is so fluid. Now that we've presented to the board, because we have to first share the information with the board, now we will be able to seek the input of students on the Cyber Academy and seek the input of students on our blended option. We always get some of our best ideas from our students.
Right.
So after tonight, your review of it gives us the go-ahead to be able to move forward for student input.
That'll be great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Actually, that gets to a point that was very confusing to me. Is there any correlation whatsoever between our hybrid and green and yellow phase, or are those completely disconnected concepts at this point?
Well, you know, that is just a great point. That's why I said we should just call it lime green right now, because we are somewhere between yellow and green. I think that all of us thought that green meant go, and that green was going to be something very different. Really what we're striving for is to be out of green and to to have no phases at all. At the beginning of all of this, the PDE and the Department of Health was very prescriptive about what yellow was going to be. That's why the language is in our plan for that yellow is indoor gatherings of no more than 25. And now the lines are sort of blurred. The same way with wearing masks. I think the mandate for masks blurred what color we were in. And now with the governor saying only indoor gatherings of 25, well, that is some variation of yellow and green. And then mandating the 6 feet of physical distance, to me, puts us back in yellow, but they haven't done that. There was some talk today while I was in the meeting with the Department of Health about and I heard it over the weekend on the news also, is that the governor may look to move some of the counties back into yellow and make them more restrictive. But we haven't seen that. We haven't seen that yet.
So do you think there could
Real quick, I just wanted to point out, I know you'd asked about some other ones. John Deal has had his hand out. I don't know if you guys see that when you're looking.
He's unmuted. So
Yeah,
Mr. Deal can just join the conversation. He's unmuted.
Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt. First of all I wanted to say is, Dr. Lloyd, thanks to you and the committee for the constantly changing updates and keeping us as a board pretty well informed, at least to where we stand. One small suggestion I would make to the committee is, would you consider waiving the parking permit fees at the high school level to encourage more students to drive during this epidemic?
You're on the finance committee there, Mr. Deal.
Give us a recommendation.
I think it's I think to Paul's point, that would be a small investment to make to maybe cut down on some of the transportation issues, and I would fully support that. But it would have to be, hopefully, well, I don't know if it would have to be in our plan or not. It's probably just a practice, but
yeah,
that's
it's
it.
great.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, all there. And my last point, and I think you guys are doing an awesome job in a hard circumstances, because these colors are all blended together and don't mean what we thought they meant. I think we should probably think about not having colors determine what we're going to do in different phases, because it could be confusing. And maybe as we go back in that next reiteration, we just kind of say, here's our fall starting plan, irregardless of, it's not about what color or phase we're in. And I think we're just going to, and I would feel more comfortable, and I think, just based on the parent feedback is, it's with masks, the 6 feet's a reality. So let's mandate, not that fluid 3 to 6 feet. It's 6 feet and it's masked, and that's how we're starting the school year. And here's our options, and kind of then let the science and the recommendations drive changes to the plan, and not pre-bake in yellow, green, purple, because that's all kind of been thrown out the window. And we'll just adapt as it comes at us. That was the final thought.
So Paul brings up a good point, and I guess we can bring this up to the committee before it goes anywhere. Do we want to just make it 6 feet if guidance is going to be end up end up changing, keep it 6 feet. And that also helps us with the close proximity that we talked about.
Yeah, and then, well, we're going with Chester County Health Department guidance, right? And if they say 6 feet, then it's 6 feet.
And so today they were walking back on their 3 to 6. They would like to keep the 3 to 6 there so that as we move into being able to, so we start school, and if we have a spike and everybody ends up online, that way when the spike starts to flatten and we can reopen schools, that 3 to 6 feet is, the 3 to 6 feet is there so that it gives everybody some leeway to bringing everyone back to school, because the minimum is 3 feet. We know that if we, at the 3 feet, we can bring all students back into school that want to come to school. So they're going to leave it there, but right now they're recommending the 6 feet. If the committee decides that you want to go with the 6 feet, then we would be determining that we are opening in the blended model with the OJR Cyber Academy. If you're not quite ready for that piece and you want to wait a little longer, we can do that too.
I can give an opinion on that. Might not be a popular one, but I think stability and knowing what to expect is something that everybody needs right now. And it might be better to just say 6 feet everywhere, make it a simple rule, and be able to move forward with a plan.
Yeah.
In terms of risk, I was looking at, if we go down the 3 feet, I think that would be acceptable for like our really small children, like K to 2, because they're not that big,
Right.
Put your arms out. If you're 3 feet tall, then you get a 3-foot distance between kids. But I just can't see high schoolers in that 3-foot range and considering that to be risk-free. I just couldn't make it mesh in my head.
I thought that it was interesting today when I met with the Chester County Health Department. They were saying that they are seeing an increase in the number of cases in individuals aged 15 to 30. And so that's our high school students right there. I think somebody was trying to add a comment.
Yeah, I was just going to go with and saying I would be more comfortable saying 6 feet, right? Because look, when I had the tour last week, 3 feet just looked too close together.
Yeah, I'm at 6 feet here. I think, Susan, we can always go back to 3 feet if conditions permit, and we can just revisit this as, if we're going to go back in. But I'm not comfortable going to the full thing as we stand here today. And I think we're probably better off adding some stability into what we're doing. Now, if it changes as it is and it's fluid, let's just come back together and we'll just revise the guidance. But for me, I'm at 6 feet.
Well, yeah, I understand everyone's points, but I am concerned about this idea of for stability saying we're going to demand 6 feet so that we're definitely in the hybrid model. Because I think about kids who are in sporting activities and things, they basically could be making a determination now that they can't participate in a sport because if they have to come to school, get a ride to school at 2:30 every day because they're not in school, or 3 days a week they're not in school, and their families can't manage that, that would be like making decisions for kids now. And I would find that very disappointing if I was a middle school football player or something, and I knew I had to now not play football because I can't get to the school. So I'm just kind of reluctant to make that a hard and fast rule as far as the hybrid model. I'm okay with leaving 6 feet in there now because that's the conditions we're in right now. But I guess I'm reluctant to say that means we're definitely going for the hybrid model.
I'm a little reluctant as well, just because I'm not reluctant on the 6 feet, I'll be honest. I'm reluctant on saying we're going to go right to hybrid just because I think we have to understand our numbers.
Yeah, you have a good point because we did talk about the fact that we could end up not needing a hybrid model if enough parents wanted the Cyber Academy already, that you're at 50%, then still, you still could have 5-day-a-week school. That's true.
So we are opening enrollment sign up. It's really sign up for the Cyber Academy on the 31st of this month, and we will be pushing out the information tomorrow to parents on how they can for the information for the open houses, and then how they can register tomorrow to folks. So if you want to see how our registration is going for the first week of cyber school, it's an important point. John Deal, I see that your mic is unmuted and your hand is up.
Yeah, to the committee members, I think we have to be very careful as a board in making arbitrary decisions about when we depart from health department guidance. If the health department says 3 to 6 feet and that stays in their guidance, I'm on board with all of you that it's 6 feet right now because the governor says it needs to be 6 feet, right? But my issue is if we change our policy to say 6 feet, when exactly do we decide to go back? Then it's that decision is back on us again versus on the health professionals that are making those determinations. So I would just caution to tread lightly in this area.
So I guess from my understanding is that they are re-looking at this, correct?
So that's correct. So we, and I hesitate to tell you what the time frame is, but the health department is expected to give us that guidance on, because we've asked them as superintendents in Chester County to give us something. You know, we're not medical experts to make these decisions. And so what's going to be the criteria? They gave us the criteria for what we had to do to be able to get to the green phase as a county. And so we're asking them to provide us a very similar criteria for how we could open our schools up more fully. And so they are.
Was that at your call with them?
That was
Were they
today.
on the call with you?
That was today's
Okay.
call, yes.
Okay, so and that's a weekly call that you have?
That's twice a week.
Twice a week, okay. All right, up to twice a week. So I guess I'm wondering if they're gonna come back to you very shortly on your next call with that.
Right, I think that next week, I don't think it will be this week, we've asked them to provide us, flow chart isn't really the best description of it, but you saw, I put up the chart about excluding and returning. We've asked them to get that to us because parents they need a really clear understanding on that information. So they're working on finalizing that, and then I think they'll be going on to that criteria.
So in light of John's comment, I do agree that we need to stick with the recommendations.
Chester County Health Department.
Yes. So I think we leave the 3 to 6 with the expectation that it's going to change to 6, and then when they make their changes, we move from there.
I just want to throw another wrench in this just for the fun of it. But,
Yeah, thanks. I can see you're having, now it's a sport for you.
Yeah. Well, since there's no other sports, this is the only one I can play. Anyway, what about the case that we get our enrollment out and French Creek Elementary has 60% children want to come, but East Coventry only has 30% that want to come? Can we move children from elementary schools if they so desire so that we can have our 50% without doing hybrid model? Come on.
Wow. I know, wow, thank you for that. Because you have to have a microphone in order to be able to talk. You might want to just come to this one at this point.
That is really an intriguing problem. I would say
You're going to have to speak louder.
Hadn't really thought about that one. I would say that my first response to that would be that we would move staff before we would move families. So I would be inclined to first move teachers before I would move families. That being said, I understand, your end game here, that you're trying to sort of get that, that 50% naturally. But I would look at the numbers, and I would start with what teachers could we move in order to keep families remaining at their school of choice. When we think about coming into a year where students will have so many unknowns, I would really want to retain their ability to stay in the school that they already know. So I would start by looking at the movement of the potential faculty and paraprofessionals that might need to accommodate those kinds of numbers before moving families. But I certainly recognize,
Yeah,
the
I
goal.
totally get that that's highly complicated. I just was thinking if there was a really huge disparity and you had room in a school, and that was the only thing that was causing you to have to switch to the hybrid model, was like one outlier school or whatever. But maybe we just wait to cross that bridge if we come to it.
I thought you were going to ask if we could have one school on a hybrid model without all the schools in the district committed to it. That was the direction I thought you were going. but
No, okay.
Is that something we should consider?
We are considering all options at this point, is how I feel. We've got options upon options.
All right. So,
Raina's in
so
here.
this is not going to the full board to get approved yet. So right now, it would be voted on August 17th. So we have time for recommendations to come back. We're gonna obviously be revisiting this again. Let's face it. So
We are. And just today, I heard of at least 2 school districts that were moving their school board meetings because of making the decision too soon. For their, they're concerned about, because families have to make plans. And all of you echoed that. I just want to go back to, Paul had said, let's just do away with the colors. I would love to, Paul, except that this is the document that we have to submit to PDE with the phases.
Oh, with the colors in it.
Yeah, with the colors in it. But I think that we all know that we are now in the lime green phase, or maybe we want to call it the Mountain Dew phase. I'm not sure, but we certainly are not clearly in one category or the other. The only category that is definitive is red, and that everybody is home, including all the employees again. So.
But we have a great solution for that, which is some type of the cyber setup with live synchronous learning, right?
We do. We have an excellent plan for online learning. We're ready for it, no doubt. And we have worked all summer to improve our model. And that's thanks to the input of our parents and our students to improve that model of delivery. And if we have to be fully online, we are ready. We've got this. But right now we're trying to figure out how we can bring students in.
Yeah, and Kathy DiMarino, I love that question, by the way. That was a great idea. That's interesting. And for the record, my 6 foot question was not then exclusively hybrid option. If we have 50% of the parents sign up for cyber and we have capacity then to do 5-day a week, I'm fine with that. It's just a social distancing in my mind, not 2-day a week or 5-day a week. So just so that's clear.
any more questions from the committee?
Oh, this is really
Okay.
minor. All right.
Good.
I've always maintained that piccolos really are the most dangerous instrument in the band, and this proves it. There's no way a piccolo player can play with a little slit in her mask and not get air all over the entire room. But
oh my gosh,
put it out
We
there.
could do away with the piccolo. I think some band people would think.
Okay, let's end our conversation.
Punchy now.
I would vote for the trombone, but anyway.
Well, trombones need a 9-foot space. You read that, right?
I did. And rightfully so.
Do we have any board members that have any questions?
Real questions.
Real questions, says Dr. Melnizek. He's on the committee. He's allowed to say that? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
All right. No more questions. Are you taking questions from the public? Oh, I'll just
All right, so we're going to open up to public questions. So we're going to go to 9:30. We're obviously going to keep revisiting this plan. So Pupil Services is working to add another meeting. We had talked about adding it at after LMP on August 10th. It's probably going to be a different day because Pupil Service keeps growing meeting wise. So we'll open up to some questions, but this is not the only opportunity you have to ask questions. You can always email us. You can contact your building principal. There is multiple ways to get your questions answered.
I'm going to invite Dr. Soder to come back up and sit at the open mic in case people are asking questions about the OJR Cyber Academy or our blended model. So remember, for those of you that are visiting us for the first time, you need to use the raised hand feature. Mr. Sanfran, you can give people the directions on if they're on their phone, how you use that feature.
So if you're using a computer, please use the 3 dots. If you click on the participant icon and then 3 dots, you'll see the raise hand. If you're using a cell phone or an iPad, just 3 dots also upper, and it'll say raise hand. So we will start with Jason. Please give your full name and your township of residence, please. And I will tell you when you are unmiked. Jason, you are unmiked.
Hi, this is actually Erin Marcellus from North Coventry Township. I have a question and a comment. So I'm hearing a couple different people saying that if certain number of students sign up for hybrid, or sign up for the cyber, then we could have 5 days a week. But it was my understanding that we are allowing the Cyber Academy to be fluid and letting students come in and out of it. So I would hope that we are reserving a seat for those students in the classroom so that they can come back and we don't have any staffing issues or, numbers issues. And as far as going hybrid, I'm a teacher myself, so I don't know what the right answer is, but when we're talking about sending elementary school students to school 2 days a week, we're talking about possibly sending them into a daycare center or setting the other 3 days a week, exposing them to way more kids, and then bringing that exposure back into our schools on those 2 days. So I do really think that we need to consider that fact as well before making any decision. Thank you.
I'm not sure there was a question.
So the first question was about cyber and holding seats in classes if it's going to be fluid. And then I apologize, Mrs. Marcellus, you got cut off at the very end, so we didn't get your other question.
So right now, the plan is that students would have that fluid ability to be coming and going from home to cyber. So, from cyber back into in-person instruction. And so we would really need to take a look at where we were in the calendar year, how many students were planning to commit for a longer amount of time, if we were going to make a change to having students come in for 5 days. So that fluid ability is really with the having that go with the students for the 2 days, the half group in, and 2 days with the other half group, because you need to maintain the number of students in the classroom being, roughly half. So it might depend on what time of year it was as to how much more time was left in the year, and we would have a better handle on how many more students might come and go. That might be more difficult for us at the beginning of the year to make a call like, okay, yeah, we can go immediately to having everybody here every day. I think that's a wait and see.
So John Deal was just texting me, letting me know, I guess he heard the rest of her comment. And it was that if we're pursuing a hybrid model, that there's the potential that students of those other 3 days would be in daycare settings. I think that was more of a statement than a question, but it's something we'll,
Right. I mean, we don't know what environments the students would be in their home environment in general. That's a tough one.
The next question is from Marie Haley. Marie, you are unmuted.
Okay, sorry
Marie?
about that. There, I'm back now. Sorry. Um, I had also had a question kind of regarding the fluidity of, you know, a hybrid to cyber and what type of notice you would need in order to have a student kind of make that switch. I'm just thinking of, you know, the numbers game that if the fluidity of that is really kind of dependent on how many students opt into hybrid versus cyber and what type of notice you're expecting to get from students and parents on that.
So as far as an actual amount of time, that's something that we can discuss administratively. At the middle school and high school, with the plan that we have in place right now, the students are fully rostered in their classes. And so if they are taking advantage of cyber or if they are in person, whatever that looks like for us, they're in that class. So if a student wanted to make a change, the school administrators talked about the fact that they may put them into either that A group or that B group, regardless of their last name. Like they may take a look at the numbers and say, oh, if we're going to have a student move back into in-person instruction, we're going to put them into the A group, despite the fact that they happen to have like a last name that would belong in the other section. But we have enough room for them, regardless, either way, in the middle school and the high school plan. The elementary plan, that would be a bit of a numbers game. We might be looking at a bit more advanced notice, like having it be at a natural break, a quarter or a trimester, so that we can make those shifts for groups of students. And we've already talked about the fact that that could be with a different teacher. So, but for middle school and high school, we do see that as being able to be a bit more fluid. And so we can work with the with the administrative staff for exactly how much time they would need. Probably a day.
Okay, so in the middle school and high school, it would be more on a class by class basis as opposed to a full day.
No, we think that we would be able to move them in pretty quickly, like within a day, back to their full schedule, because they're enrolled in that class and they're participating in that class. And so if you think about it, if you think about a class of 25 students, if 10 students are signed up for cyber and 15 students are signed up for in-person, then if a student was to return, it's still the 25 students. So you're not exceeding the number that were originally assigned to the class. So we do believe that that would be fluid for the students. We would be able to accommodate them.
So even though the student has a last name of Adams, they may be put into the Z group.
Potentially. I think we would just look at the numbers for that and we would say, oh, if, in that scenario where I was saying, okay, if 10 students were working in cyber and you had 15 students in the class, if they were divvied up so that you had a 7 and an 8, and you look at the whole schedule, you might make that recommendation. But I think we would just look at the numbers at that time.
Okay, thank you.
Then the next person for public comment is Heather Zabicki. Heather.
Frustrating how that.
Oh,
Heather, you are unmuted.
hi, Heather Zabicki, North Coventry Township. I just had 3 quick questions. Bear with me one second, I just wrote them down. Do we know the amount of students that are allowed on a bus, and will athletic buses and after-school activity buses still be allowed? if the middle and high school students have to clean their desks at the end of each period and walk 6 feet apart in hallways, does this allow for more time between classes, or will actual instruction be cut down? And the other question I have is if, for example, the high school, 60% want to do in-person instruction, how do we determine who will have to do virtual versus who can do in-person? Thank you.
I can answer the last one. So, so because the students are fully rostered into their classes now,
You might have to speak up.
because the students are fully rostered into their classes now, there would not be a problem for the number of students who would be eligible to be cyber and the number of students who would be eligible to be in person. So that's not an issue for middle and high school, or really for elementary either. We know the number of students who we anticipate returning to school this fall, so we have a place for all of our students. On the other.
I think the other question was if we're at a 6-foot guideline, what will the students do? They would be expected, we'd be at half capacity if we're at a 6-foot guideline or less. So there would be an A group and a B group, so we would be much lower. Students be expected to clean their desk at the end of class at the secondary level. And yes, if there's half the amount of students, the expectation they would leave the classroom and hopefully move to their next class. We're hoping that even though they have to move to their next class 6 feet apart, if it's at half capacity, it shouldn't take as long to get to their next class. Having been through the high school and the middle school quite a bit, there is plenty of time to get to their next class if they don't stop and talk to their friends, if they're not gathering in the hallway, if there's no buildup in the stairwell, et cetera. So I know the high school and middle school have very good plans for sort of up to down staircases and things like that. So we're hoping everything can move smoothly through the school because of fewer students in the school.
Right. And so I'm not sure if Mrs. Carmine's appearing on our screen because she wanted to answer the question or...
Sure. No, I'm happy to answer the transportation question that was asked. So right now, the Chester County Health Department is stipulating 2 students per seat on a bus. So with the hybrid model, we'll be at half capacity, and then we also know that some students may choose cyber. So we believe that it will be less than that. So right now, the max capacity would be 48 under Chester County Health Department guidelines. That could change. I don't know if that will change or not. And Dr. Lloyd, I don't know if there was any discussion about that during your meeting.
So as we've talked about over the past month, is the wording in our plan says to the maximum extent feasible. And again, we heard that from Chester County today. That if students are wearing face coverings and they are physically distanced, the more precautions we can put in place, the safer we keep everybody. But there is a reality that we only have so many buses. And so we're encouraging parents to drive their students. We're encouraging students to drive that are eligible. So we'll wait and see what occurs. Mrs. Carmine, did you answer the question about activity buses?
Oh, no, I haven't. Thank you for reminding me. Right now, we are not going to be running activity buses. It's not included in the budget plan for the year. So as we stand right now, there will be no activity buses.
Okay.
All right, so it is after 9:30, so we're gonna end here. But I just want to remind everyone that we will have those open houses. They'll be listed on the website for cyber and for hybrid. And then also, if there are questions about the current plan that's out there, it is a draft for the fall, and you can reach out to us at the school board. You can reach out to Dr. Lloyd. You can reach out to your building principal. There's lots of different resources that you have to get your questions answered. And we definitely encourage everyone to reach out.
And so my recommendation would be, if you have a question that's specific to your child's school, to contact the principal, because they can give you the specific answer. If you have questions specific to the plan, you are welcome to email your building principals, but I'm happy to answer your questions there as well. Remember, we do have this information posted on the district's homepage. You can go and read more. The presentations that Dr. Soder made are there. We have the summer reopening plan, a health and safety plan is there. And once this meeting ends, we will post the draft that we discussed tonight. And you're welcome to email or call, and we will be happy to get back to you.
Can I just say one more thing? This is for Dr. Soder. I'm looking at the website, just in case people want to find this. Under summer, fall reopening, I see a tab that says blended learning plan, and then it has all the times for the, but I don't see differentiation between if we're talking about blended plan or full cyber plan on this.
Do you see at the top where it says summer, fall reopening? It says Cyber Academy, and then right next to
that's
it,
a separate tab.
it
Okay.
says blended. But I agree with you that I will remove the dates that are appearing on under the cyber.
Okay. So yeah. So the Cyber Academy is on a different tab than the summer, fall reopening.
Yeah. So
Okay.
we put them separate because people are interested in being able to specifically look at.
Oh yeah, and I'm just trying to help out anyone who's interested in this. So if you
Yep.
do click on Cyber Academy, you see the virtual cyber open houses, and then you see the blended below. You're saying you want to take that away?
I'll take the blended ones off of there
So
because
it doesn't
that's-
get confusing.
Otherwise, it's confusing. I
Okay,
think you're right.
great.
Okay, that's done.
Okay.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're going to adjourn the meeting.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.